if we could, gently remind folks that dumping stuff on us the day of a hearing makes it impossible. We all have day jobs, and it's not like we're sitting waiting for stuff to come through,
Well, I think that was the intention.
I would open it and take a formal vote on it. You'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey, Sean.
John?
This is 3 nights in a row. My wife's starting to wonder.
Who were you with? Were you with the Walpole board last night, Sean?
Yeah, with the select board.
Okay, I know what that was about, yeah.
Okay, so we're waiting for Dave Anderson, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but I turned my seat around because I had a lawyer tell me that I know said, "Is that a shower curtain behind you?" So I got all self-conscious and started to figure out different view angles from my Zoom meeting. I settled on this one as being the best.
Hey, you're looking good. You're looking baby blue. It's a baby blue room. It's probably your kid's room or something.
This is a room, an extra, like a bonus room. Works out pretty.
There you go.
It's where my son does all his practice putting.
I call him a catch-all.
Catch-all room. Yep.
Yeah. It's above our kitchen, so it gets really warm up here. So if you see me
Ooh.
the window.
It was so nice out today. It was lovely. We can do the continuation without Dave, John. Can't we?
Yes, we can. So
We have 5 people.
Ashley, do you have the applicant, Mr. Petrosi? Is he out there?
Yeah, let me promote him. He is promoted and should be able to unmute himself.
Okay. Good evening. This is the Walpole Zoning Board of Appeals. Tonight is Wednesday, February 24th. It's just after 7 p.m. And we have 3 cases this evening. The first one is case number 20-40, Wall Street Development Corporation, about an administrative appeal of the zoning enforcement officer's violation notice of cease and desist regarding property at 48 Burns Ave for violations of the comprehensive permit number 0519, which is currently under appeal. So today we had a multi-page document from Mr. Petrosi sent to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we're going to have town council look at that. And at this point, I think that what we want to do is we want to continue that until March 24th, and that's my recommendation. Is there any discussion from board members on what you want to do with this?
No, I did not have a chance to read it at all either.
Okay.
No, I read it, but I do think it warrants more study and somebody.
Okay. Bob, any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, no, I haven't had a chance to look at it. But I know I've said before, not just for this applicant, but for matters generally, it's really difficult for a volunteer board to digest information on the day of a hearing when you have day jobs and we're all trying to, keep that under control as well. So as much advance notice as as can be provided is great. And unfortunately, we're stuck in situations having to continue when we just don't have time to review information.
Okay, and Drew, anything on you, as far as you're concerned on that?
No, I don't, Chairman.
Okay, so could I have a motion to continue case number 20-40 to March 24th?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, second for discussion. Town council, do you have anything to add on this or give us guidance on?
No.
Okay, so this will be a roll call vote to continue this until March 24th
At 7 p.m.
at 7 p.m. Yes. Thank you, Ashley. Okay, roll call vote. Suzanne Murphy,
Murphy, aye.
Bob Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Drew Delaney,
Aye.
Jane Coffey,
aye.
and I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay, so that is continued until the 24th. Next we have on the agenda is case number 0520. And that is, again, Wall Street Development Corporation for Dupuy Street, comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Laws 40B. And tonight what we were going to do is talk with the peer review and any department comments on this. So fortunately we have with us Sean Reardon, and Sean, you've sent out a document, got it up here on the other computer, rather detailed and lengthy, so thank you for the, it's dated February 22nd, and many of the issues were resolved, but there are still some that are hanging out there. Do you want to talk us through and explain what you found on some of these?
Sure, quick summary. So the biggest change is they added a cul-de-sac, which was fantastic. The cul-de-sac dimension is about 80 feet, and I made a mistake in my review, and Rob Truex was nice enough to point it out to me. The comparison is 88 feet is required under zoning regulations, and not 104 as noted in my letter. So I just want to clarify that. Important for context, Hummingbird Lane and I think Lorraine Road, those cul-de-sacs are about 75 feet, but they have a full 28-foot wide roadway. Victoria Road, right next door, is about 85 feet. So I'm not sure why those don't comply with the 88, but just to give an idea that 88 is, I'm sorry, the 80 proposed is not too far from some of the cul-de-sacs that are around for subdivisions that are about the same size. They also did a lot of work on the pond. So if you recall, we had a lot of concerns about kind of the issues related to the pond and overflows and potential instability. They provided a great new detail that addressed all my technical concerns, gave us some additional detail on the walls, gave us some additional detail on the spillway, adjusted the sizing of the pond, which made it provide more storage, less likely to overflow. So really a lot of technical work done there that addressed most of our issues. I think some of the stuff that still remains are just the things that aren't really going to change. They're the 20-foot wide roadway that's substantially smaller than what's normally required. But I thought it's important to note that even though it's smaller, 20 feet is the minimum width required for emergency access, so it meets that requirement. And having two 10-foot lanes is enough width to get cars by each other comfortably. Not great, but it's a subdivision roadway that's got a cul-de-sac at the end. So there's some mitigating factors there that can maybe make it seem a little bit better than what otherwise you might be thinking. I think the biggest outstanding issue is just the whole emergency access. Because the road's so narrow, it's very tough to get in and out using the lanes that are there. And unfortunately, for some reason, the plans that I got, I really couldn't read very well. And Bill Scully was nice enough to send me some information, but we still didn't have roadway center lines clearly demarcated. So it was tough to tell how far over the road that they were going to travel to get into the site. So we'd asked for a little bit more information on that. But at this point in time, all of our technical issues are addressed, and we've recommended conditions where some outstanding issues might need to be addressed in a final plan.
Okay, thank you. And we went through going through the document, we could see what issues were still hanging out there, but most, like I said, most were resolved. Do any board members have any questions or comments on the peer review? Go ahead, Jane.
Yes, John, if I might. I have in front of me now, dated February 22nd, from the fire department. Sean, have you had a chance to look at this?
I haven't, but
Well, the thing that concerns me, it starts, the proposed cul-de-sac is too small in diameter, the encroachment curve required. It doesn't take into account snowbanks, blah, blah. The next one says, the analysis appears to show more than the center line's encroachment, but rather a requirement to straddle the center line to make the right turn onto Doobie. This is prohibited per 527 CMR 18.2.3.48, traveling in the opposing lanes. The use of auto travel is prohibited in design of all fire apparatus. It is a dangerous situation. Then it goes on to say only one utility pole, and it goes on to say they have concerns about the naming of it because there are others, Diamond Street and Diamond Pond. But I'm primarily concerned about the first three things, which indicate that the fire department is not happy with this. And when you're saying everything has been resolved, I'm wondering, is this a February 22nd after the fact, or is this something that's come about, actually on February 22nd, and this being February 24th, could all of these things have been addressed in 2 days?
no, these are issues that have been identified very early on the process, Jane, and that we've talked about. What I'm referring more to are the sort of the technical issues. Either they've been resolved or they've been sort of brought to the end of their conclusion, where I don't know if there's any more that can be done. So in particular, the 20-foot roadway, we've expressed our opinions on that, but there's little or no movement from the applicant. At this point in time, I don't expect there to be many changes related to that. So what we've done is we've just had to kind of qualify where that puts you. As far as these issues that the fire chief brings up, those are all things that we've talked about in the past. I'm not sure there's a solution for them. Because the roadway is so narrow that there's really no way to get in and out without the fire truck having to cross that center line on High Plain Street in order to get into the roadway. So those are situations that absolutely still exist, but there really is no practical solution for them. From my review standpoint, there's not much more I can do, and that's kind of what I mean by resolved. At the end of the analysis, it's your decision to decide whether or not it's good or bad or acceptable or not. I'm just trying to provide as much information as I can and see if I can get the design to advance to a point where it minimizes those kind of decisions. But at this point, it's as far as it can go.
When it says the analysis appears running at straddling the center line, it says this is prohibited. To me, prohibited means it's against the law.
It is. So the what chief, and I'll defer to the chief in all cases on this, but the law says the National Fire Protection Regulations say you're not allowed to travel in the opposing traffic. So there's a lot of debate on what that means. And in all cases, the fire chief, as the authority having jurisdiction, can decide what's appropriate or not, even if it doesn't comply with those requirements. So really a lot of the responsibility and the decision making rests with the fire chief.
So in other words, this could go forward as it is now, and we've done as much as we can. And the fact that the fire chief is feeling that it's not acceptable, that's something we can't do anything about.
Very little, if anything, given the constraints of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead, Bob.
So one of the concerns with the site originally was the location of the drainage basin and the concern about it perhaps overtopping at some point and flowing to the I guess that would be to the east down to the adjacent property, which is at a lower elevation. Could you walk through a little bit more about what sort of changes have been made there and what what concerns remain in terms of that risk to the downstream landowner, just so we have a little better understanding of that?
Sure. So originally they had very little detail for how that berm was constructed. So as you can imagine, if a berm is constructed out of poor materials, or if it's too permeable, you can get seepage or some other problems. So what they've done in response to part of our earlier comments was they've had a design, they've advanced the design, had it reviewed by a geotechnical engineer, and those are engineers that specialize in soils, and they've provided an extra level of protection in terms of permeable core that's keyed into the underlying soils. They've also given more definition to the spillway over the top of the berm, so that if it's ever used, that there's a broader spillway that eliminates our concerns about erosion or uncontrolled overtopping. So I think in total, I'm pretty comfortable that it's going to be safe. It's the performance of it such that now with their outlet control structure, the current design, it doesn't stage up quite as high, so there's more storage in the basin available for larger storm events. There are still issues where, some of the letter of the law it doesn't comply with, but they have changed the basin to a non-infiltrating basin, which relieves some of those obligations. So in total, a much more comfortable place in terms of design right now.
And if it's a non-infiltration basin, that wouldn't they need extra capacity just on that basis alone, because they're not going to lose any out the bottom, so to speak? So they're going to have a larger capacity if it's impervious.
It depends, or they have to look a little bit in more detail at how they design their outlet control structure. So what they have is the outlet control structure is kind of like a brain. When you move openings around and change the size of openings, you can better align your runoff patterns with the controlling conditions. So there's a lot of way to mitigate sort of the size factor. The key thing about it not being an infiltration basin anymore is that there are additional standards that apply to infiltration basins that aren't necessarily applied to ones that don't require infiltration. So for example, separation from groundwater and things like that start to not become an issue because you're not relying on the water getting out the bottom of the basin in order to meet your performance criteria. And for us, what it means is that there's a sort of it's more reliable when you're not relying on an unreliable infiltration rate to meet your numbers. If you're just using structural controls, there's a higher degree of certainty that it's going to operate the way you expect it.
Okay. So then, sorry for these questions, but if so let's say there's a storm, the basin fills up, is this mechanism that's shown on here designed to release at certain elevations, and then if so, like where is the runoff from the basin directly?
So the runoff that leaves the basin goes to the drainage system. So a portion of this site that's being developed already drains to the stormwater infrastructure in the street, but it drains at a pre-development rates since it's heavily wooded, it runs off a lot slower. Once it's developed, it will run off faster if not controlled. What this whole device does is it stores water on site so that it's allowed to discharge at a slower rate that matches existing conditions. It's basically a vessel that holds back water that would have been held back naturally by the woods in the landscape. Instead, we now have to create that volume in storage. The big change is a lot of times design will take credit for water leaving the basin through the ground. In my opinion, it's not so much that's not so reliable as sort of just an opening in a structure. You can't really count on that to work all the time. So it heightens up our level of sensitivity. Says, okay, well, if this doesn't function the way we expect it, what's going to happen? Well, it might overtop because it's not letting as much water out of the ground. other things might happen along that line. When you take away that component, when you're not relying on the infiltration to meet your numbers, then all of a sudden it's like that our level of confidence that it's going to work as expected goes up quite a bit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Suzanne, go ahead.
You're on mute, Suzanne.
Oh, sorry. What is the percentage of the increasing of the storage?
In terms of the size of the basin,
Yeah.
it's about the same. It's not that much bigger, but the outlet control structure's been a little bit more carefully designed.
Because this area does not drain. There's no drainage here in this area. In real, like today, it's very, very poor up there.
Runoff,
Yes.
correct.
Everyone up there owns a sump
Runoff
pump.
number.
Most of them own 2 sump pumps today, as we sit here. You can ask
Okay.
people out there, all the people up there.
So,
It's really bad. So it's good that they're doing this. That's why I asked, what's the increase?
yeah. So I get terms confused. Are you more concerned about groundwater or runoff? So
Both.
the water. Okay, so runoff is the water that leaves the surface.
Yep.
So in this case, if we're worried about groundwater, the net result here is there's going to be less. The groundwater is going to be actually lower post development, maybe slightly, because a lot of the infiltration is going away. They still meet their pre-development runoff requirements in their infiltration requirements, but there's nothing that's going to make it worse by any stretch of the imagination. It's definitely going to be a net improvement in terms of that.
Even with the clear cut.
Yeah, because with the clear cut, what it means is that less water is going into the ground. There is a small loss in, you get a sort of a natural reduction in groundwater from trees during the spring as they're taking up water from the ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a mercurial science. There's a lot of give and take.
Rolling out again, Jeff.
Standards and as the best tool that we can for designing systems appropriately. There's always going to be sort of peripheral matters that are sort of underrepresented or overrepresented. But in this
I'll
case,
try not to lean on it.
I think it's a pretty good solution.
Okay, but there's not really, you can't even give me a percentage of increase in a storage unit.
I can. So
That's not much.
it's not much, because if you compare to previous samples, it's about the same size, occupying about the same location. But certainly I can find that number out, and Rob Truex can certainly provide it for us as well.
It's just notorious up here. It's like really, really bad. It's
When you say bad, you mean the high groundwater? Or-
yeah. Drainage. Nobody's you don't drain nothing. It's really bad up there. Rob can tell you. He knows it very well.
Part of the reason why he decided to forego the infiltration component.
Yeah,
That's
what I'm.
for.
Yeah, it's probably exactly what he was thinking. So, right, Rob? We're talking about you.
I'd probably just put my video on. You're talking about me.
But I was just telling Sean that it's like one of the worst areas in town.
I can quantify that a little bit for you, Suzanne, what we did to the basin to make it store water.
Okay, thanks.
So Sean and I spoke, and if I could share my screen quickly there, Ashley, can I do that? Working.
I'm just worried, because everybody up there's got a sump pump. I just don't
No.
want anybody to have 3 sump pumps,
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So this, you can all see this now, I assume.
Yep, thanks, Rob.
So I'm going to zoom in on the basin as much as I can. So the top of the basin, the berm is 305 elevation. The flood elevation for the 100-year storm was 304. And we had a small spillway here about 8 feet wide that was at 304. So when it hit the 100-year storm, it would spill over. So what we did was we lengthened this spillway to about 60 feet. And we only made it 3 to 4 inches lower than the top of the berm. So we provided about 8 inches more storage capacity in the basin, and we made the spillway, instead of having this little narrow thing, Sean and I discussed it, and it was actually Sean's idea, was to spread it out, so if it ever gets up, and then raise it up, so that we can store more water above the 100-year storm if we do have a big storm event. So I don't know the percentage of that increase, but it's quite sizable, because that, 6 to 8 inches is at the top of the basin where it's the widest and the largest, so that's the most storage it provides. So that was the biggest change on the storage capacity and the spillway. So, and this spillway would just, it's long, it's grassed, and it would spill over the entire length of the retaining wall.
And how will we maintain that when all the crap starts to grow in there? And
They got to mow it. They need
Okay.
to mow it. They need to maintain it. It needs to be mowed. It needs to be maintained. It needs to be cleaned out.
So,
It
and
needs to be
we
done.
can condition that.
You can, and there is a management. There is in your condition. You should require that yearly reports are submitted to the town. Normally, under a project of any sort, we're usually in front of conservation, and they usually condition that we submit reports to conservation. This is not going to have that luxury. It's not going to have conservation. So it's important that you put that in your condition, that yearly reports are submitted. And that's just, all it is a maintenance report. There's a maintenance program in there. It will go with the condo docs. And then every year they go out, they have to have the catch basins cleaned, they're gonna have the pipes checked, and they'll mow this. This thing should be mowed multiple times a year. Mow it
So
down,
what
clean it up.
we can converse with Landis on what the procedure should be
Correct.
on the maintenance. Okay.
And you could make them the authority that gets the reports if you wanted to.
Right,
You could get the
right.
reports.
And Suzanne, it is required, an operation and maintenance plan is required as far as complying with the stormwater standards. So, that's included as part of the submittal materials.
Okay. All right. Sounds like a plan. Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Actually, Rob, if you would, could you bring that back up? I have one question about the drainage.
Yep.
Is there, I think I heard you say that there's existing drainage on Doopy Street. Where does that, is that true that there's existing drainage on Doopy
No,
Street?
not till you get to the intersection of High Plain.
Okay, so you're going to be connecting into
High Plain.
High Plain into.
Yeah, it all goes down to here.
Yeah. Okay.
It'll close.
And John, just to be clear, although the catch basins are in High Plain, the water from Doopy Street ends up in those catch basins.
Correct.
They're adding a new catch basin at the corner of High Plain and Dopey, and is that because they anticipate this overflow?
No. So what we're doing is we're eliminating the existing catch basin and making it a manhole and putting in a new catch basin on the curb. And the reason being is, Drew, this puts it more in compliance with today's stormwater regulations, which that goes catch basin to catch basin and then out to the manhole. The configuration on the DEP today is you want to go catch basin to manhole to manhole. So this will change that, so they're not going catch basin to catch basin. You don't want a catch basin dumping from one catch basin to another because it causes turbulence and the sediments get back out of the system. So we're changing the system right there. We're making it better at the intersection. So we're making that catch basin, we're converting it to a manhole and putting in a new catch basin in its place.
And Rob, one of the things I asked or recommended that get considered is putting another basin opposite.
Right over here.
And the reason for that is we
Yeah.
are increasing the amount of pavement that drains to High Point.
The only thing I would
Other
say,
catch
Sean,
basin
is that gets really tight with all the utilities right here. We have a manhole, we have a drain line, we have a sewer line, we have a water line. I just don't even know if I can get it in and get it across. I mean, I would condition it that we could look at that during construction. I don't know if it can be done physically.
Okay. The thing I'm concerned about is that it has to get out into High Plain, into the gutter
Right.
plane and around.
What I was thinking when you said that, one of my thoughts was maybe a drop inlet.
Yeah, that'd work.
You know, put a little drop inlet to put and put it across to the
Yep.
manhole.
Yep.
I don't know what that is.
It's only a shallow basin. It doesn't have a sump. So what you do is you put this little shallow one, and it's only a couple feet deep, and it just shoots out to the other catch basin.
Okay.
So it just carries it right across.
It's like directional type thing. Okay.
Yeah, and it'll
Yeah, it's
keep
like-
the water. Yeah, it'll keep the water from going down a high plane. It'll put it in the catch basin across the street.
It's like a cup with 2 straws instead of 2 cups with 1 straw each.
Exactly. Mr. Chairman, if we're done speaking about the drainage, I just wanted to point something out overall about the telephone poles.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Could I just ask? Sorry.
There's a
could I-
comment in this telephone pole that everyone's talked to. It's come up in comments a couple times, and the fire chief makes reference to it. The pole that we're moving is right here on the side of the road up by house number 6. We are not moving the pole at the intersection. 12-29 is staying. It's beyond the intersection. It's not in the way of the rounding. I think there's just been some confusion of where the pole is that was getting moved. So I just want to point that out. So Sean and I actually looked at this. We talked about it because I think Sean thought it was out in the street more. And that's why it was, we wanted to have it moved before someone could occupy. But as you can see, it's right on it's in the way, obviously, to put the curb in the edge of the road, but it's not out in the middle of the roadway. It's probably got to be moved back about 2 feet. So I just want to make that clear so everybody understands what pole we're moving, what we're talking about, because it comes up a lot in some of the comments.
And in response to that, John, our comment letters, we don't see a real risk during construction because you can temporarily provide enough width, but before occupancy, my opinion is that that pole needs to get moved so it's not sitting in the middle of the curb when people are living there.
Rob, do you have a letter from, I don't know if it's a Verizon pole or Eversource, stating that they're willing to move that?
You have to put in a request, Drew, for move of the pole, and they won't even look at our plan until it's approved. They don't look at preliminary plans. They won't give you a layout for, like, we always look for electrical layout. They want a signed, approved plan. They won't even look at them.
I understand. So I guess my question is this contingent upon the plans being approved by the board, whether or not that pole can or cannot be actually moved, correct?
Oh, we have the right to move it. It's on private property.
Okay.
We have the right to move it. We'll just have to have it done, and they'll have to do it. We'll put in a request to move it. So it's just, and you know how fast they operate sometimes. We've seen poles hanging around before in some odd places.
No, I agree. I guess it's...
Yeah, I don't think it's
sometimes a condition could be set that there's a well served from utilities. Not normally is it the electric or phone company, whoever owns the pole, but where you're basing your plan off of a pole being moved, I guess that would certainly be something that the board would want to make sure happens.
It may even go underground before that pole, for all we know. The other pole is across the street right over in here. This is the next one up. So it goes from here to there. So maybe, this just brings the service. There's a service going to house 3 from here. And then there's a service going to house 6 from that pole. So, maybe that pole would get moved to this side of the street. Maybe we go underground from here and give them an underground service. That'll be discussed with the electric company, how that gets played out.
It would be beneficial to the board to know what the plan is and not kind of what might happen down the line.
We won't know until we have an approved plan, though. That's something they won't give us a thought on. They won't even look at it. So what generally happens in a planning board situation when we have a subdivision, they put a condition that we come back and show them the electrical layout once we have it. So you put that same condition there, we bring it back to you.
Perfect.
Yeah, so you can see what's going on, where it's going. That's a standard condition that most towns put in place on subdivisions, like we bring them back the electrical plan. So.
And Drew, they're going to have to coordinate with utility to get extension of the service up to serve their project. So that it's a pretty sort of easy thing to address, given that they're going to be having to extend the service anyway.
Yeah, I understand. I guess I just, for the abutters' knowledge of, if they're going to have service interrupted because this development wants to reconfigure their electrical distribution, I guess that would be important for public knowledge is really where I'm going with that.
Yep.
Hey, Bob, Bob, did you have a question, a comment?
I just had a question going back on the drainage. What's the elevation of that proposed outlet structure, I guess, relative to the bottom of the basin? I'm just wondering if there's a situation in which there might be standing water in the basin.
Main pipe is this main pipe is below the basin bottom. It's right probably about 6 inches below the main one out of the outlet structure. But there are small. The way the outlet structure works, though, there are smaller ones that go. They change in elevation going up that structure because the bigger storm lets out more. We're trying to hold the smaller storms back longer than we do the bigger storms. So the outlets they start out small and then they get bigger as you go up the side of the outlet structure.
Okay.
And Bob, there's also a requirement in the stormwater management standards that requires the basin to be emptied within 72 hours.
Right.
Sean, I have another question about the stockpile area at the south side of the property. With the new plans and the elevation change that's current with the south side of the property, is stockpiling material from site excavation? Is that a good spot to stockpile it, or is there a risk for people to the south of the property there?
No, I think because that's if you're referring to the cul-de-sac area, Drew.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of the flat top spot. So if there's a good place, that's probably the best place. And what it does is if Rob and I talked about this, that the goal is to construct the first 6 homes before issuing a permit on the other 2, so that we have that upper area available for the bulk excavation. So then when the first 6 homes and all the drainage is done, we now don't have as much reason to stockpile material, and it's a much more manageable quantity. Then we can use the cul-de-sac for a short period of time, or the area around the cul-de-sac, to manage just the soils that are left for the last 2 homes. But I would imagine there's two stockpile areas identified, 2 soil management areas identified. One just upstream of the drainage basin, and then the one at the top of the hill. So, they're going to have to use both ends, I think, to get the work done.
I guess the Landis might touch upon it in their conditions, but and just a basic silt fence with hay bales is adequate to stop any sort of overflow off the property for stockpiling purposes?
I think so, but it has to be watched. So with any kind of erosion control, if you just leave it and forget about it, it's not going to work the way you expect. But if you're on top of it and manage it, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to manage the stormwater with just standard erosion control measures.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and hey, Drew, you just mentioned Landis. I assume you're talking about Landis Hershey from Conservation. Is that right?
I apologize. Yes, I should have clarified more.
No, that's fine. But Conservation hasn't been involved with this at all, as far as I know. Because there's no wetland resources around here. So this will be on the zoning board. Anything like that. So.
And Shirley, if I could add, we can certainly consult with Landis for any advice she might have.
Right, but because there's no wetland resources, they haven't been involved with this at all. Nothing, as far as I know. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And John, just to be clear, you still have a local stormwater management bylaw that applies even if there are no wetlands. So we still have mechanisms to enforce regarding those same issues.
Okay, that's a good point about the stormwater management. Okay, good. Okay, anybody else on this? Can we just go look at the cul-de-sac? See the cul-de-sac? It's changed since our last meeting, and the configuration of the two units at the end.
Thanks, Rob.
So, I think it's an improvement. It's going to solve some of the issues, but it is different. I just want everybody to make sure any abutters that are out there, they're seeing this if they recognize that this is different than what we had before.
Chairman Lee, can I ask you a question about the erosion control monitoring? Would that be relied upon by the building inspector, or would that, who would that fall under as far as monitoring conditions during the project?
That's a good question, and fortunately, we do have the building inspector, Mr. Yanovich. Do you want to comment on who looks at the issues of erosion control on a site like this?
Yes, anything on the site plan, anything that's been approved as part of a plan in the process of our inspections or upon being called or notified, we will inspect and make sure that the on-site conditions during construction meet any required site plan approval.
And Chair, they'll also have a maintenance and monitoring requirement as part of their NIPD's permit. So the developer and the federal permit they have for working on sites that are greater than an acre requires maintenance and logging that inspection and maintenance task.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask questions about this cul-de-sac?
Go ahead. Yep.
Are we to 2 visitor parking spots now, total? Is that what I see in this plan? Total
Correct.
for the entire development, 2 visiting.
But each home now has 4 spaces. Whereas when we had the more units, we only had 2 spaces per unit.
So you think each home, a garage, so if you're visiting, you're not gonna go park in somebody's garage?
No,
So
people who live there will park in the garage most likely.
So 2 garages and 2 spots in the driveway.
Right, and then 2 additional
And
off
then-
the cul-de-sac.
Okay, where is mail again? Are you doing 1 mail unit or
It's
8 boxes?
I think, Suzanne, what's been happening is the post office makes that decision. They did that on a couple subdivisions lately, and they've been putting 1 mailbox at the
When we
end.
do 40Bs, we try to figure out if you're gonna do 1.
You could do a gang box up in the front, sort of like right up before the first unit, right up in this area. See, there's space there.
You have to, start dealing with that, because you're gonna have Amazon trucks, FedEx, it's gonna be traffic, and they're not gonna be able to park, because
Well, we
this is
could put
20
it up
feet
on the
wide.
end of the cul-de-sac. Usually that gets discussed with the post office. They want to know, they want a part in that.
Yeah, well, this is gonna remain private though, no?
Yeah, it is,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, the road will be maintained privately. I mean, you could do a mailbox for each house. That's the other option. If they're willing to drop it in everybody's house,
well, isn't that something that you have to find out, or is that my job to go find out?
no, it's not your job, but generally that doesn't happen until they start to go and pull building permits.
Well,
At the building permit level.
all I know is we ask at every development what's going on, so usually we have some kind of answer. But, okay.
Susan, I think what we can do is make a condition that the final plans have to stipulate a
Where it is.
and access to a mailbox.
And what if it's blocking the road? And the thing's
You can't put it
done
in
by
the road.
then?
Well, then
Well, I don't know.
We'd kick it back during the review of the final plans and say it's unacceptable.
Okay, all right. I'm just trying to cover my butt here, that's it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just speak a little bit on the cul-de-sac myself for the neighbors.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So this new layout, I just want to point out around Unit 7 here. I know the woman at the end of Victoria was concerned about runoff and the swale being extended up there. So I did put a small retaining wall along her property line that extends all the way halfway down, right about here. And it goes all the way up to the corner of the unit. And then we extended the swale down along beside that unit so that no water from this unit or this side of the property can get over to her. I don't know if she's on the line, but I just want to point that out so she understands we did that. We took
That's
that into
good.
consideration along that side.
That's good.
Yeah,
And
it
it
is
also
good.
reduces the amount of runoff that's going down towards Summit Ave.
Correct. Yeah, we're pulling water away from Summit as well by doing that. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Board members, any other questions or comments? Okay, So Ashley, do we have, do we have any people from this area that want to comment on this? And what I'd like to do is, I'd like them to stay focused on, new information or, issues that are before the zoning board right now.
Okay, so if you would like to give public comment on this, please raise your hand or put your name in the chat. Okay, so Janice, Janice, did you put your hand down? Okay. Janice? You should be able to unmute yourself. Janice?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sound good, Janice.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to quickly say a couple of things. That when you mentioned about the parking, like the visitor parking, that is really ridiculous, just two. And to say that the houses now have 4 spaces, most families, each person in the house has a car. And then you add visitors and it's just eaten right up. And even if there are, say, maybe just 2 people in a house that own a car or some sort of a motor vehicle, a lot of people are using their garages these days, especially in small units, as storage. So I just feel that that's really totally unrealistic. And I'm very, very upset. I can't stress enough that there's too many units back there. It just doesn't warrant it. It's not a ghetto. We're not in the city where there's no land for for people to build. I think the applicant has been very unfair to the neighborhood. You're still talking a little over half the size of Victoria Circle and Hummingbird Lane. I forget how many houses are on Lorraine Road, but the one that's right next to it, Victoria, that's what we're dealing with. The traffic situation, and then if you have children, we've said this before, it's just not realistic. The applicant has an agenda, and that's money. And that's all he cares about. He's going to get his money and leave the damage behind for decades and decades. And it's just not right. I certainly do not oppose, I've said it so many times, I know we can't just put 1 home back there, but 2 homes, that would really be sufficient, because when you talk about the water, the 100-year runoff or whatever, you put all the homes that is proposing now, it just doesn't make sense. The sewerage is going to be overworked. You just don't know what's going to happen. And then they'll be stuck here, the rest of us, with the damage that happens. So I just really, I'm very upset about the number of units. There's no need for it. I think the housing authority, the fact that the applicant went to the housing authority before any of us knew anything of the abutters of what was going on, was very wrong, very underhanded, and totally inconsiderate, and would not appreciate it if it happened to him. I just feel that the housing authority is aired, because when you see something on a piece of paper, we all know, yes, plans will look nice, but then you have the practicality of actually putting it in place. And then the other big thing that I hadn't read yet that I was glad that Jane saw was the fact about the fire apparatus. And they said that the new equipment can't make the turn. It's against the law to go up the street like that. It's just not right. So I'm sure I'll have more at some point, but those are the top things that really have gotten me at the moment. Utilities, I know they can always overcome and they move things, but I also don't understand totally with the putting in the new the manhole, when he said across the street, when Bob said across the street, I don't know exactly where that is going to be placed, because at first it was looking like you're showing at the corner of my house there, where that would be a Pandora's box to try to dig up around there. So I don't know where they're talking about the sewerage, the manholes to be, because we do have one existing right now on the corner opposite my property at the Murphys. So if you could clarify that, where they're proposing those to be.
Yeah, Janice, I can explain that whole intersection down by your house on Route 27, that's gonna be dug up. They're gonna be, adding drainage down the street, so that area is gonna be, it is gonna be dug up, the roadway.
No, Susie, I understand that, you know, you have to dig up an area, but I didn't know where the actual manhole is going to be put for the drainage. Is it going to be built right there on the corner, or, because then they said across the street, so I'm not really sure where, you know, the positioning of it.
If we put the plan back up,
Yeah, let's put the plan back up.
Because we do have a fire hydrant right directly across the street from my house on 27, and then there actually is a water, a little metal plug there that keeps popping up off into the road all the time, and the town keeps fixing it, but it keeps popping up. So if you go straight across, yeah, it says fire hydrant, as you can see it.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I can explain it.
Yeah, go ahead, please explain this.
So, right out in the front now, Janice, where you live on Murphy's side, there's a catch basin on his side of the street.
Correct.
So that catch basin will stay there. We're just gonna take the cover off and put a manhole cover on it, so it's no longer a catch basin.
Okay.
And then we're gonna put a manhole out in the middle of the new street, right here. And we're gonna pipe it over to that catch basin, which is now a manhole. And then, because that catch basin is no longer got a cover that can accept water, and that'll actually be behind the curb, we're gonna put a new catch basin back about 6 feet along the new curb line and pipe that to the catch basin as well. So they're all on the opposite side of the street from you, but what we would...
Oh, that's what you mean by, I'm sorry, by the opposite side of the street. I thought you meant across on High Plain.
No, they're on Dookie
Okay.
Street.
Okay, because I couldn't understand
what
that.
we're probably going to do, which the board's probably going to condition based on Sean Reardon's comment, is on your side over here.
Yeah.
We're going to put in a drop inlet and run it to this catch basin. That one will be shallow though. That won't be a big basin. That'll only be a few feet deep. And that will have a shallow bottom, and it'll just have a sleuth way, and it'll run the water right over to this catch basin. So that any water coming down Doopy will get picked up by these two structures right here.
Okay, but thank
Janice,
you.
but that should help eliminate any puddles, eliminate any problems with the sidewalk, and eliminate flow from going out into High Plain Street.
Yeah, but it won't take away the ponds from the yard. Yeah, we have a huge issue here with water. It's terrible.
Poor drainage, I will admit.
It's worse than poor.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you explaining to me when you say across the street, because to me, when I think across the street, I just look across on 27. So now I understand.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay. Janice, anything else?
Oh, just the number of units. It is outrageous. It's outrageous. I just really think, I can't imagine 8 homes. You've got, what did we say, 13 on Victoria Circle, and yet you're talking a little over 50,000 square feet. Well, you know, well, it's not really square because it's not a, square. It's a long piece of land. But no, it's just too many people. It is not, it's unconscionable to put that many people in such a small area. And I would think anybody wanting to come into this town certainly doesn't want to go into a sardine can. You can put all the trees around if they want, but it's horrible. The traffic is going to be ridiculous. It's hard enough to get out onto the street, so.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Julie Sullivan.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just have, now this has changed to a cul-de-sac. I just had one comment request. In the previous plan, when there was a hammerhead turnaround, we had discussed putting an additional tree buffer because of the light pollution coming in. So any cars that are turning around the cul-de-sac, those lights are going to shine right into my family room. So if we could put an additional tree buffer, just to protect us for a bit from those lights shining in.
Yep, that's a condition we can add.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
that definitely can be done.
Can I ask a quick question? How many 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 1 bedrooms do we have here?
I know 10% have to be 3 bedrooms.
Oh, what's my number?
Do we have
Rob.
Yeah. You're muted.
Mute button, Rob. Mute. Rob, mute.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman?
I think it's only, I mean, he showed plans, I thought it was 10% was 1 unit. So he has to have 1 unit as a 3-bedroom.
What's the breakdown of units in bedroom?
Maybe Mr. Petrozzi could answer that better than I.
Oh, you want me to speak? Oh my God.
Not really.
No, I was asking Rob.
Thanks, Suzanne. Always nice to hear those.
Anytime.
I think I'll have to go back to the application is, but I think there's 6 2-bedrooms and 2 3-bedrooms. I think that's the breakdown, but don't hold me to that. It could be 7 and 1. Don't know, but it's at least 6 to 2.
Okay, anybody else have questions or comments from the neighbors on this?
Yes, we've got 3 hands raised. So Tyler H, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm one of the abutters. I'm at 20 Victoria Circle. Spoken a couple of times. So I have 3 things that I wanted to chat about quickly, and 2 of them actually are more questions than anything. So I'll start with the statement once here. I think I've heard on privacy enough, so I took a look at the architectural plans recently. So if you're looking at the rear elevation one, that's 3 stories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 windows, 2 full-size doors. That's a lot of windows times 4 houses right behind me. I mean, that's 40 windows looking into my backyard. If the windows could be like smaller, right in the right side elevation, those are like those smaller windows. I mean, I know the trees are there. We've discussed 4 feet is kind of nothing. So I don't know that we fully addressed privacy, and like I said, there's 40 windows looking into my backyard. So that's the statement there, and then the 2 questions. First question here, I guess I don't really understand. The fire department had mentioned a couple things are prohibited. What does that actually mean? Like it's prohibited? Does 40B allow to get around that? Are there conditions? I don't understand. If it's prohibited, that means to me that it's prohibited. So that's a question for you guys before I move on to the next point.
Okay, thank you, Tyler. And we do have town council with us, so George, do you mind taking that one? Because I don't want to give my wording on that. I'd rather have your legal word on when we hear that it's prohibited by the fire department, what does that actually mean on 40B?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. George Pucci from Town Council's office. It has to do with state versus local requirements. So if the fire department is referring to state standards, those would govern. So that's what it means. I don't know myself factually how those issues are being reconciled. I did see comments from the fire department, and then I don't know if Sean had commented on those as well in terms of, is there anything in this current design that the fire department is deeming prohibited under the state fire code or state standards? If so, we really should try to address that. Otherwise, if it's a local requirement, the board stands in the shoes of the other local boards and officials such as fire department. So it's really a state versus a local requirement.
And I can add a little bit to that because I've covered this several times with other projects. So under the state regs that George refers to, the phrase is, it says what the standard is, and then it follows up with unless otherwise authorized by the AHJ. And the AHJ means the authority having jurisdiction, and that's the fire chief. So really the fire chief has the latitude to to say, well, you don't have to do it like this, or you have, so they can grant relief from it. And particularly when it comes to that travel in the opposing way, because in a lot of ways that in order to take a right turn into a site, you have to cross the center lane for a bit. There's plenty of applications where that's viewed as being acceptable by fire chiefs. So what we want to make sure is that this ends up going back to the fire chief, and it has to be something that he's comfortable with, or else it's really not supported by the regulation.
Tyler, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I just, so I guess what's the next step on that? If the fire chief mentioned it, what's the next step in terms of that case? I'm just trying to understand the whole process here. I've never been through this before.
Yeah, I should add, if that's an issue, we need to figure it out. We need to figure out what the fire chief is saying, and if the current design is as Sean has said, is it something that he's able to grant relief from or not? And if he's not, we should figure that out, and you're going to need to decide what to do with that. And I don't know if any type of change can be made in the event the fire chief does not agree to grant the relief.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. Petrosi.
So I know this issue has come up on many projects in the past, and I think the fire chief, I think we really need to start with the main part of Chapter 18 of this fire prevention regulations. And I'm just going to read it into the record so you folks can understand. So the general scope of this...
Petrosi, you're not going to read it into the record. You can submit it to us, and we can have that on file, because I want to make sure we get the full context of whatever you're submitting.
Okay, so I won't read it. I'll just refer you to section 18.1, Council, of that regulation, which clearly sets out the applicability of those regulations that fall under it, and you can be the judge if you don't want me to read it into the record.
No, you can submit it to the zoning board, so we have the full context, not just one small section of it. So we want to.
It's really what is the fire chief saying about it? Is this current design something he can approve to you or not, to the board? Do you
want me to read his sentence?
Go ahead.
To you, George?
Yeah. You're going to read his section. You should read 18.1. What the hell is this?
I'm reading the fire chief's recommendations that were given to us this week. Travel in the opposing lane in section 18 states the use of the travel is prohibited in the design of all new fire apparatus access roads. This is a dangerous situation that should be reevaluated prior to adding additional structures to the response area. I only read one sentence out of the whole fire chief's letter.
Can I read one sentence, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Mr. Petrosi, you go ahead, read one sentence.
It's very clear. Fire department access to water supplies shall comply with this chapter. The provisions of this chapter shall not apply to any city or town which has accepted the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, or similar laws which provide local jurisdiction over fire department access. So all of these regulations that he has cited do not apply to this project.
Nope.
Go ahead, do whatever you want. I'm not stupid.
Neither's the fire chief.
Well, tell me how you get around that wording there, then. Ask town council.
Okay. No, I've already asked town council. And George, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I have nothing to add. I mean, if that's his response to the fire chief's comments, that's his response.
Okay. So, Ashley, who else? I see Tim's there. Does anybody else want to talk?
Yep, Tim was up next. And
yeah, how you doing? You guys hear me?
Yes.
All my comments had to do with what was again actually just answered in the last 2 minutes because it was about what was going to happen with the fire chief said.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
A little better.
Sorry, I try to put kids to bed at the same time. My comments were all answered based on what the next steps were with the fire chief, but just as a general comment and concern, I don't know if this is a normal process, but what concerns me as a neighbor is it seems like these plans are changing over and over again, and it's happening on these Zoom calls, and things are being decided on these Zoom calls, and it's just really weird to me to see this process play out the way it is, with this is being moved, this is putting over here, this is a good idea, this is a great idea. You would think all this stuff would come in before the meetings actually happen, and the plans would be where they're at. So that was just my general comment. It's just, for somebody who's not used to this process, it seems very strange and concerning as a neighbor. That's it. Thanks for all you guys do. I know you put long hours into this.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks. Okay. And sorry, Tyler, we cut you off. You had one more question? Go ahead.
No worries. Yeah, and then my other question, again, is a little bit about process. We've talked through a lot of conditions, and I guess I'm just a little confused as to like when those conditions need to be met. Is it prior to approval? Is it during construction? What happened? Like what is done up to that point? I feel like every meeting there's 3 or 4 or 10 other conditions put on this project, and I'm just wondering when that list is finalized. Again, never having been through this process, I'm just curious about what that looks like.
So conditions apply at different points. Some of them are when the first building permit is issued. Some of them are at the end of the project, such as, landscaping would be towards the end, things like that.
Okay, and when do we see this, like when is a finalized list of conditions? Is something going to be submitted that we have the opportunity to review before you guys make a judgment on whether it gets approved? I don't know if that's the correct terminology.
Actually, do you want to explain how the decision will be drafted?
You can try. So a decision will be drafted, and the decision will outline really kind of all the procedural things that have taken place, meetings, deliberation, memos, and so on. And within that decision will be conditions, and they'll be organized of things that happen pre-construction, during construction, after construction. That document, ideally the hearing remains open because that allows additional information to be added. And if that's the case, then we could make that draft. We'll add that draft to the website. It is a public document. If the hearing is closed and the decision has to be drafted, then there can't be any further information given. If you want to reach out, I'm happy to talk with you about this process further. Tomorrow, you can give me a call.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious because, like I said, lots of conditions. Obviously, we've been having these late night calls for a while now here, so I guess just wanted to make sure, what does this look like moving forward? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey.
Okay, so it looks like Julie Sullivan's hand is raised again. I'm not sure if I just didn't put the hand down or if she has another comment. So, Julie?
Hi.
Oh.
Hi, this is Jim Doyle, Victoria Circle.
Oh, hi, Jim. Sorry, your name says Julie, and I thought you were Julie. So
she gave me the link to the.
Okay.
2 questions. At Julie's house, how come that house at the end is 19 feet from the property line? Why is that so close? I was just wondering.
Okay, so under normal zoning, it would have to be back 20 feet, and because it's a 40B, they are applying to be exempt from existing zoning of the town of Walpole. That's why you're seeing the density here.
Okay, that's what I just wanted. And the other thing on the, if the chief does authorize them to cross the center line, and there is a fatality, is that on the chief personally, or is it on the town? I mean, I know it's on the town's insurance, but I didn't know whether he would be liable on a separate lawsuit for authorizing it.
I can't speculate about lawsuits that could or could not happen, but clearly we're concerned about safety, and that's one of the things that we're looking at.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Jonathan Falls.
Hello, Ashley. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So this is John Falls. I'm the resident on 47 Summit Ave. I have missed a few meetings, so I apologize if I bring up things that have been mentioned in the past. I know John wanted us to only bring up new things, but a few things I wanted to voice seem to be getting pushed to the side. So I know I voiced in one of the first meetings visitor parking. No one is really going to park in front of neighbors' garages. So if you have some sort of gathering, those two visitor spots are going to be filled up real quick. The real concern from our neighboring street is that almost definitely it will be used for parking. And I can see that being Summit Ave because that's where the cut through those woods will easily be. So that's a big concern for Summit Ave. So that's really just a statement. Back to the fire chief. I know there's been a lot of feedback about crossing that center line. That won't be just the fire trucks though. Clearly Lou doesn't really care about the safety of the travelers, but for everyone who does, just this week on my street, there's been 2 vehicles of similar length to a fire truck. So one was picking up trees that were cut down, and another box truck was delivering appliances, both things that could easily happen for this street. In that same fire chief report, there was a suggestion, and I know we kind of danced around it on this call, but to move the utility pole prior to construction. I just want to advocate for that. I work at a utility, so I know how long it takes to do any sort of construction through us. And as one of the presenters alluded to, it is a long process. So that is one condition I'm hoping gets in there. And then just looking at the plans, those homes are going to be very tall from the ground, especially on the backside towards Victoria. I know in prior meetings, we've talked about the arborvitaes for privacy, but obviously the plans have changed multiple times. But it's going to take multiple years for those to really grow and create any sort of privacy. So I'm hoping there's a stipulation in there for mature plants, not baby arborvitaes that are going to take 10 years to show any sort of privacy. That's all my feedback. Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks. Up next, we have Mark Rice, and then we'll go to Bill Scully. Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Rice, and I live at 64 Summit Ave. I just want to make a general comment about safety. I read the fire chief's letter as has been brought up numerous times already, so I won't, beat that to death. But at the same time, I just wanted to point out, the street is only so big, and with the lack of parking, if even one person parks on the street, there's no way a fire truck's getting down there. And that really seems like a really severe safety hazard. And I just don't see getting around that. The road is only so big. It's not going to get any bigger. It seems like this project is being forced to be something that it really doesn't need to be. And it could probably be half the size and a lot smaller, and it would still be fine. That's all I have. Thank you.
Bill Scully.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. So I just wanted to say a couple of things related to, one is they relate to the fire chief's letter. I did want to mention on the cul-de-sac. So in the cul-de-sac, we met with the chief, and Sean was there and Ashley were there, and went over different things, and we ended up changing the hammerhead, which can certainly accommodate fire apparatus, but he wanted the cul-de-sac, and that's what we modified the site design to. And when we then went through Rob's plans and checked the fire turning, we ended up with a minor tweak on that, which I don't know if they're in the current plan, Rob, in terms of entering the cul-de-sac, if he was going to make that loop around. But with that, we've shown the fire apparatus can move around the cul-de-sac without a problem. It's an 80-foot in diameter cul-de-sac. There's jurisdictions around the country that use 70 feet, 72 feet, certainly 80 or less feet to accommodate fire apparatus. This is 80 without counting the berm, 82 counting the berm. And I can't remember in our letter earlier in the month when we submitted all this stuff, you know, if there's concern of the overhang, the ladder overhang, coming around the circle, certainly you can condition a foot or two off the cul-de-sac, making sure if it was mail delivery by home, the mail, you know, the mail post has to be set back. The ladder is 8 feet high underneath the clearance. So, you know, nothing within a foot or two of the circle of the berm, you know, would really inhibit anything, especially if you kept it clear. So his comment there, it's just not, it's not accurate. I mean, it's a great comment, he made it. And I've met with the chief on numerous projects, so going over this thing, I think he's misinterpreted the evaluation of that. In terms of the comment number 2, first of all, we're not anticipating any of the fire apparatus driving down the opposing lane of traffic on any of the streets. As he's going to make right turns, it's a 20-foot road, which 20 feet can accommodate 8 homes easy. 20 feet meets his requirement to have minimum width for the road. And whether you had 4, 6, or 8 homes here, you've got a right-of-way that's going to provide about a 20-foot road. So it's not going to change anything in terms of fire truck movement up and down Dupy Street, which is accommodated. Structurally, it'll be constructed and designed to accommodate fire apparatus. In terms of movements that when you get to High Plain, there's going to be 2 situations where the fire apparatus is going to make a little swing to make his right turn, similar to what he probably does leaving Stone Street and making a right turn on School Street. There's no way that he can make that turn without probably encroaching on 2 center lines. So he's gonna swing a little to the left, and as the plans have shown.
Twice you've said probably. So we're going to stick with facts and not your interpretation of something. So, you know, talking, unless you have measurements for Stone and School Street, that really is not applicable to what we're discussing.
That's fine, Mr. Chairman. I'm just saying that on roadways that are 24-foot wide, making a right turn, you're going to cross the center line with a 41-foot long fire apparatus.
Okay.
So as we've shown in the plans, we're not driving down the road in the opposing lane. As he's coming to the to make a right turn in or a right turn out, he's just going to pragmatically, he's going to probably swing to the left as we've shown for about 20 feet before turning in. If he's entering Dupy Street under emergency conditions, he's got his siren going and the lights flashing.
Mr. Scully, we're going to follow up with the chief of fire and get an answer. Yeah. So I think
that's fine. And Ashley, Bill also mentioned that there were changes that they had considered that weren't incorporated into Rob's plan. So I've asked for, we had a couple issues with just the readability of the stuff that was submitted. So we have asked for some clearer figures to be provided and for the plans to be updated. So if that could happen, that would help quite a bit.
The only thing on it, Sean, was as you enter the cul-de-sac, putting in a 35-foot radius, flattening the curve to enter the cul-de-sac.
Right. So
which
Bill,
shows
it's
up
important that all this
on our-
stuff gets on a plan.
Right.
That all the plans match up. So,
Right.
you know,
I think Rob's plans had been submitted prior to the truck.
I get it, but we'd like the decision to be based on a set of plans that's all consistent. And it would be good if we could understand kind of explicitly where the wheel travel is and where the bumper overhang is. And you know, I'm not necessarily terribly concerned about the ladder overhang. If we can get the bumper in the wheel path defined, that would be great too. And here's why: because the bumper, if the bumper overhangs the curb, it has a chance of hitting a parked car in the driveway or some other improvement. You know, chances are the ladder hit a parked car. So I'm less concerned about the ladder overhang, more concerned about the bumper overhang. And for fire vehicles, the bumper overhang is like 4.5 feet. It's quite a bit.
Okay, Ashley, who else do we have?
Those are all the hands that there's no other hands raised.
Okay, so at this point, we still have some issues that I think we need to get resolved, and particularly some of the fire safety issues. So what I was hoping to do is continue this meeting until March 24th, and we could do it then. Amy, what's the schedule looking like?
So for March 24th, as of right now, we just have Lou's cease and desist, the admin appeal. If any special permits or 40A come in within the next week, they'll be added on to that, but I don't see more than one 40A case being possibly added to that date.
You're on mute, Shirley.
Mr. Petrosi, do you want to extend this until March 25th, and we would have the hearing on March 24th?
So let me ask you a question, Mr. Chairman. What are you asking for more information from us as the applicant, or I mean, I think we've provided everything that we can provide. I'm not sure what we're.
Sean just mentioned additional information on the fire and the paths and the bumper and whatnot. That's outstanding.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything outstanding. I think all of those things have been incorporated into the plan, and there's really nothing that we can submit that's going to be any different than what's already submitted. I mean, I have no problems with giving you another continuance, but I don't know what you're asking us for. Are you asking us to submit more information, or are you asking us just to continue it so the board can get another opinion?
No, what I'm asking for is the continuance so we can deal with some of these fire safety issues and any of the other issues that came up tonight, but particularly the fire safety issues. If that's what I, we can, believe me, we can close the hearing if
I'm happy to submit the section of the regulations that I was referring to, so that the board has an opportunity and town council has an opportunity to review it. I think once you review it, you'll understand where I'm coming from, that the regulations that are cited by the fire chief are not applicable. So I have no problem submitting that. And but that's really kind of the only thing that we can submit that's going to change anything.
Shirley, we might want to ask Cliff Bomer if there were any things that he needed to see also.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Cliff. I know you were there. I'm sorry. So, Cliff, are there some issues that you want to address at this point on this? And
there are a number. I'm happy to wait to talk later, but in my opinion, I kind of have three categories of issues, some of which include civil issues. And then there are issues of coordination of the drawings. I think if you read, I mentioned that several times in my report, the civil drawings aren't coordinated with the architectural drawings. And also the building plans are really lacking a lot of critical information. We don't even know how tall the buildings are. There are no building heights indicated on the drawings. We don't know the materials. We don't know if there are basements. There's really a lot of missing information. So I don't mind continuing, but I would ask that that this report be observed and that the applicant supply additional information so that we can really adequately assess the impact of this. They're also missing photometric plans. I'm not convinced that the landscape plan really provides adequate buffering for the residents. I do think there are alternative site plans, which is something I'm happy to talk to Sean about. I think there are some options for improving the site plan that could deal with not just the fire safety, but also, this is not my realm, but I think this is one project where I am very sympathetic to the parking issue. I admit that I agree that expanding the driveways in that manner is a big improvement from the last plan, but all it takes is 3 cars coming to somebody's house and it's unclear what they do. And that is an issue. I think it's a real issue. So I have a lot of things that I think are both site related, because I'm still not quite over some of my initial concerns about site planning, and there are numerous deficiencies in the architectural drawings. So I don't know if I'm happy to wait to do a more thorough or do a working session to talk about these deficiencies or whatever it might take.
Go ahead, Mr. Petrosi.
You know, I don't want to get off point here, but you know, the regulations are pretty clear that the drawings, the architectural drawings, are preliminary in nature, and what Mr. Bomer is describing is something that is a detailed architectural plan, which
the height of the building.
Ashley, every time I speak, Ashley, you have to interrupt. What is your problem?
Well, I'm the one who interrupted, and the height of the building is not a detail. That's a critical issue. Knowing what the materials are is a serious issue.
Mr. Bomer, I just go by the regulations.
Mr. Petrosi, everything through the chairman. So,
Mr. Chairman, in terms of Mr. Bomer, I just read the regulations. We provide what's required in the regulations.
I've read the regulations a few times myself.
So you know that they're preliminary. The architectural plans are preliminary in nature.
How tall are the buildings? What waiver are you asking for relative to building?
We're not asking for any waiver.
How tall are the buildings?
Mr. Bomer, if you have questions about how tall the buildings
sorry. That's right. It's in my report anyway.
Right. And I think that's really what we need to look at is Mr. Bomer's report that identifies these things that he feels are missing from a design peer review position. So that would be helpful. So those issues are still out there. So we've got another hearing to go for tonight, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say, if you know, Mr. Petrosi, if you want to extend this until March 25th with the hearing on the 24th, we can do that, and we can look at these other issues, or you know, we can wrap things up tonight.
Wow, that's quite an offer. No, we'll continue one more time. I'm kind of enjoying these meetings. Keeps me up at night.
Okay, keeps me up at night too, but not for the same reasons, probably.
But I would say that we need to deal with the regulations. If the regulations say preliminary drawings, then we need to stick with preliminary drawings. And, you know, final architectural plans are presented when we go to request a building permit. And that's really kind of how the regulations are written. I'm not making it up. This is what's here. I mean,
I know. There's, you know, fortunately we have Judy Barrett here with us tonight, who also knows the requirements for 40Bs. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I look at plans. I apologize. I don't want to extend this any longer, but I look at plans every single day as part of my responsibility, and I have for the past 20 years. I could not make a decision on a 40A case or a 40B case based on what Mr. Petrosi has submitted. There isn't enough information that's been presented for preliminary plans, never mind final plans. So if there's a question as to whether or not there's enough information, there has not been enough information submitted even for preliminary plans.
Mr. Chair, can I speak?
Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Preliminary plan is, I understand that, and it's true, that is what the regulations say. But the regulations also make it clear that the board gets the information it needs to understand the impact of the project. And so if there's a question that's not answered in the submission about, so that the board can understand the impact of the project and its feasibility, then it is the applicant's job to provide that information. So, you know, hopefully this will all work out and everybody will get the information they need. But I just want to make it clear, you know, if the board doesn't understand what you're submitting because you're not giving enough information, then you need to submit it. That's your job. That's your job as an applicant.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, somebody needs, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I just think we need a definition of what preliminary architectural drawings consist of. So in our book, preliminary architectural drawings is what we submitted. If you're looking for detailed, more detailed, then somebody should tell us what preliminary means in their minds.
Okay.
You can't invent these rules.
Yep. So that's fine, and that's why we have the rules that outline what's required. Suzanne, go ahead.
One of the abutters that's right behind one of the buildings asked for the height tonight and was not given the answer because none of us know. And he has an absolute right to know what's going to be behind his house and the height of it and the materials involved. We couldn't even answer the question as a board.
Okay, so back to what I was trying to do is, do you want to, Mr. Petrosi, do you want to extend this until the 25th, and we'll have the hearing on the 24th?
Sure, why not?
Okay. So at the request of the applicant, this will be continued, and the hearing will be continued until March 24th, 7 o'clock. And could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Moved by Suzanne.
Second.
Second by Jane. Any further discussion on this?
Just one, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request that the fire chief or one his designees appear at the next on the 24th, to the extent we have additional questions on the on his memo and what his interpretation is. That would be helpful.
Okay, and actually, you'll be able to coordinate that, I hope, if the chief or Deputy Barry is available. Suzanne?
Should we also maybe have Landis to go over the storm management? Because this is a tough area up here. And I know it's not wetlands, but unless we can do it through memo, I don't know.
I think we can do it through a memo, and
okay.
But what it would be is really what we're talking about. That's a condition. That'll be wording in the condition of how that. Okay. Sean Reardon, do you agree with that?
I do. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Roll call vote to continue the hearing. Suzanne Murphy.
Murphy, aye.
Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay, so this is continued until the 24th, 7 o'clock p.m., and the applicant extended this until the 25th. Okay, thank you, everybody, and we have the next case coming up. So. Okay, and we have Mr. Yanovich with us. Very good. Okay, next case is case number 30-36 for 52 School Street. Administrative appeal of the zoning enforcement officer's notice and cease and desist under section 3.2 of the zoning bylaws. Failure to secure a certificate of occupancy for the new use of metal and steel manufacturing, section 5B of the zoning bylaw. Schedule of use regulations, heavy manufacturing of steel not allowed in the limited manufacturing district, resulting in a noise violation for the production of loud and offensive noise to the abutters of the business. Okay, so that being said, we probably have a number of people that want to speak on this, and if I could, I'd just like to start out with Mr. Yanovich. Do you want to bring us up to where we are on this from your perspective? Because we were at this about a month ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Mike Yanovich, Building Commissioner for the Town of Walpole. Subsequent to last meeting, we had an agreement between the fire department, between the police department and the building department and the occupants of School Street regarding deliveries and how they would conduct deliveries. After that, we had an accident, which many of you may be aware of, which we put further restrictions on, details and requirements for notification if oversized loads were coming into School Street. And there have been a number of other smaller incidents regarding street signs being knocked down and property being damaged. So as far as enforcement goes, they're still exhausting their administrative remedies. They have called for details when there were oversized loads, either outgoing or going into the property. The police chief has been made aware, and he did have police officers out there at the time when oversized loads were going in. But other than that, we've continued to receive calls from the abutters regarding noise, continued to receive calls from abutters, again, regarding the street signs being knocked down or damage to property from tires from trucks that were turning in the neighborhood. And again, we're just awaiting the zoning board's decision as to what, so I just want to, remind the board that there are two issues at hand here. One is the use, right? Is the use as currently, as the building is currently occupied, is the use allowed? And then secondly, if the use is allowed, is the noise, does that exceed the allowance of the town's noise bylaw, noise ordinance? So that's where we are. There's been no further enforcement other than the cease and desist order being amended to say that there should be no deliveries in and out, which was detailed as oversized loads. So again, we're just awaiting the board's decision as to whether or not this is an allowed use and whether or not the noise issue also should be enforced.
Okay, thank you. I do have one question for you, Mr. Yanovich. You use the term exhausted administrative remedies. What did you?
So I believe town council can opine, and we ended last meeting with the abutters attorney opining on this. But if we were to go into court, or if this were to go to another venue, such as land court or superior court, the judge would look and say, have you exhausted your administrative remedies? Meaning, did you go to the Board of Appeals, which is the next step for appeal? And here's where we are. We're at the Board of Appeals, which is the first step to appeal my decision for cease and desist. You can't really, and again, town council can opine on this, but you can't overstep the local jurisdiction as to whether or not there is a violation. The court would look to the local jurisdiction to render a decision prior to getting to that venue.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Okay, town council, any guidance for us before we get going on this?
Sure. Good evening again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. George Pucci from Town Council's office. Just to bring you up to date, you're really at the point where you've heard plenty of information on this appeal. I don't think that there's new information to come out. So, the way I'm looking at it in terms of guidance, I think you're kind of getting to the point where you can close the public hearing and take a vote on this appeal. As you know, you're going to make a vote, affirmative or negative on the appeal. So you're either going to uphold the appeal, the board will either vote to uphold the appeal, or the board could either fail to have the requisite quantum of vote to uphold the appeal or affirmatively deny the appeal. And there's also two issues on the appeal that are before you. Is one, the cease and desist in terms of the use as of right, And one thing I'm confused about what Mike just said, I thought the other issue was the certificate of occupancy as opposed to violation of the noise bylaw. So, but if Mike can clarify that, I'd defer to him. But there's at least two issues before you that have been appealed on the cease and desist order. And just to bring you up to date as to what occurred last time, you'll recall at one point, I think Bob had suggested, you know, possibly looking at conditions for a certificate of occupancy. Between the time of the last hearing session and tonight, Attorney Corner, on behalf of the business operator, submitted a letter to the building commissioner, you know, restating his position about the validity of his appeal, but then going on to suggest a number of conditions that the operator would be amenable to in the event of a certificate of occupancy for the property. There have been no substantive discussions concerning that. I don't know if that had been submitted to the board itself. That letter was received fairly recently, and again submitted to the building commissioner. I think your administrator Amy got a copy, but I don't know if you've seen that in advance of tonight's hearing. That would also be a public document that, you know, others would be able to see who are interested in this. But there's not a lot of additional information, you know, out there for you to get. And I think you're at the point where you're ready to kind of discuss this, see where you're at, and possibly close the hearing and take a vote.
Okay, thank you, George. Mr. Yanovich, do you want to clarify that for town council on where we are as far as the cease and desist?
Yeah, so the cease and desist and the certificate of occupancy, they run concurrent, or they run you know, one subsequent to the other. If the board finds that the use is not an allowed use, or it was a change of use, an occupancy would be required. The building occupancy itself could be a Board of Building Regulations, a separate issue. If it's a building code issue that there was an intensification of the use, we could require that they secure an occupancy, and if they want to appeal that, they can appeal that to the Board of Building Regulations. But the occupancy is really tied back to a determination of the use as the zoning bylaw defines it. Is this in fact an allowed use within the zoning bylaw? So that's where we are. One kind of begets the other, but the noise issue is also on the table here, because if the board does not make a decision whether or not, and this is a very difficult issue that I brought up in the very first hearing, we could be out there regardless of the board's decision every day determining that there's been a noise violation, and then that noise violation would need to be appealed at that point. So that's where we are, the noise violation and the occupancy.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify. The cease and desist had certain issues. The cease and desist said that this is not a use as of right. It doesn't qualify as limited manufacturing. So the cease and desist issued on that. There's an appeal of that.
Correct.
And I guess what my question would be, what else was the subject of that cease and desist order, which has been appealed? Was it the noise bylaw as well, or?
Correct. It was the zoning bylaw specifies, and you know, the wording escapes me, but you know, injurious noise to the abutters, essentially, regardless of the location of the use. It specifies in the bylaw under enforcement that no use shall be injurious or annoying to abutters. So that was another aspect of the cease and desist.
John, I've got it. I don't know if you do. I think Mike clarified. So.
Yeah, go ahead, George. I'm pulling it up right now on my other computer. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Mike clarified sufficiently what exactly is before you is the bases for his cease and desist order. The fact that cease and desist order has been appealed, And you can break it down in your vote. You could vote them, issue by issue, or you could just vote on the appeal of the cease and desist as a whole. And I would remind the board again about the quantum of vote issue. So, if you're making an affirmative vote, if you don't reach the required quantum of vote, that affirmative vote will fail. So in other words, if you're so I just wanted to clarify that. I'm pretty sure this board is cognizant of that, but you just want to be, aware of the fact of, how you need to vote on this, depending on substantively how you want to come out.
And when we get to that point, George, I'm going to have you walk us through to make sure that we do that exactly correctly. And I also will add that Associate Member Dave Anderson will be sitting on this case, and I see Dave is here. Other thing is, so George, you're saying we could actually split the cease and desist into whether it's an allowed use and whether it needs to get a occupancy permit. We could address those two separately.
Yes, you could.
Would you recommend that if we get to that point?
It might make sense. I mean, it depends on what the board's consensus is on this.
Okay.
If the board ends up denying the appeal, which would either by way of an affirmative vote or failing the required quantum of vote to uphold the appeal, you're going to end up with a violation, a use which is not permitted as of right. So, depending on how the board comes out, that will be relevant about what happens here.
Okay. Okay, so that being said, any board members have any questions at this point? Bob, and which?
I think I agree with George. I'm certainly welcome to hear anybody who would like to speak tonight, but I think, I have some thoughts on, the board's deliberation and how we might approach, the issues that were just laid out. So I don't know if you want to discuss that now, or if you want to, hear from folks and then close the hearing and have that deliberation. I'm just not, however you want to do.
Yeah, I would actually like to hear from both councils. They can give a brief summary of where they're at, where they think we're at, and then if neighbors have some new information to provide, and we have been receiving videos along the way, so we have seen what's going on there at the site, and letters from abutters and neighbors. So the zoning board has received that information, but Bob, I think we'll do what you just sort of suggested. We'll have people still present some information, and I will start with the councils, and I will start with Mr. Corner, because this is his appeal or his applicant's appeal. Okay, Mr. Corner, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Mark Corner, represent KW Steel, as you know, having spent some time with it, with me over the past couple of hearings, and I want to thank the board for the time that you've given us. And I know, particularly, and I know the board has put a lot of work into this, and as has Mr. Pucci and Mr. Yanovich. A couple of things I wanted to address based on what Mr. Yanovich said is what is presently before the board. There is a cease and desist. There is a cease and desist order before the board, which is based upon the assertion that my client's use of the premises is not a permitted use. There is also a noise violation that arose from a single instance back in September. That was a single instance of use of an impact wrench outdoors. That had been addressed previously, and my client has not used that wrench outdoors Since that time, that was explained in, I believe, the first hearing. That's nothing that has been repeated. I am not aware that there is any issue before the board presently regarding any noise complaints. Similarly, Mr. Yannis mentioned something about a street sign being knocked down. We are aware of one street sign being knocked down. I'm not aware of a single shred of evidence that indicates it was by a truck going to my client's servicing my client's business. In any event, I don't believe that's an issue that's before the board. I think the primary issue before the board, where this all starts, is this an allowed use under the town zoning bylaws? And I would refer the board to I won't repeat myself, but I would refer the board to my letter dated that was originally submitted to the board back December 14, and that basically lays out the legal argument as to why this is in fact a use permitted as a matter of right in the limited manufacturing district under the town bylaws, and I would agree with Mr. Pucci. I don't think that there's not a lot more to add to the record. Mr. Pucci did mention a letter, that I submitted both to the building inspector and to Ms. Messier, and I believe that the board. I'm hoping that the board has it, but it is a part of the record. That letter was sent on February 17, and as Mr. Pucci pointed out, that lays out some additional information. Turning to the issue of this. Is this a permitted use, an allowed use under your zoning bylaws? You simply need to look to your use table, and in particular on pages 29 and 30. And I'm going to try to share my screen if I can. And what should be on the screen is section 5 of the use table regarding wholesale and industrial uses. And if you look down the columns where it said the last two of the last three columns, LM and IND, that lays out all of the allowed uses and prohibited uses, and those uses calling for a special permit. The two uses in the use table that seem most applicable here are P and Q, heavy machinery, which my client does use some machinery, although I know some of the board members have seen the facility. I guess that would be up to them to determine whether that is heavy machinery or not. And also light metal fabrication. And again, what my client does primarily is does a lot of welding of joining together of metal pieces on a piecework basis for their clients. If you look to the zoning table, you'll see that those are allowed uses in both zoning districts, as indicated on the table here. And you'll also see that there are very few uses in the industrial district where there's a distinction drawn between limited manufacturing and industrial manufacturing. Now, I note that the bylaw does define limited manufacturing as low density, wholesale, and unobtrusive manufacturing. It suggests that that's not an issue that the building inspector has or the board has discretion to determine. The town, in its wisdom, has set out the definitions of the types of uses that are permitted in each of these applicable zoning districts. And I believe somebody during the last hearing, I can't remember who it was, basically indicated, well, if this use isn't permitted in this zoning district as an allowed use, then it's not allowed anywhere, because there's no use on the table of uses that I can find that permits a use in the industrial district and prohibits it in the limited manufacturing district, at least any that are remotely applicable here. So as I said, this is not a case here where there's any discretion by the building inspector in determining whether the use is allowed or not. The bylaw dictates that, and here that I would suggest that the bylaw dictates that this is an allowed use, and presumptively my clients are authorized to operate their business in this location. My client also recognizes that this is a bit of if not unique, very unusual situation where you have a manufacturing facility located essentially surrounded by a residential district, and my client is cognizant of that, and they have made every effort to be a good neighbor, and have attempted to do so. As I've pointed out at previous hearings, and as indicated on the letter that I sent on the 17th, which, I'm sorry, wrong letter. My letter of September 17 indicates some restrictions that my client is prepared to live with on a going forward basis. They've changed their business hours, so they're starting later in the day. They're starting at 7 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. They're in terms of dealing with noise issues. They're making every effort to keep their doors closed while they're engaging in noisy work. For example, the wrench that caused the problem the first time when it was operated outside. As long as they're making every effort to keep the door closed while work is ongoing. Obviously, if access to a vehicle is required to get in, they would have to open the door. But they're certainly willing to make those accommodations on noise. Clients also has done and is willing to continue to engage a police detail for loads that require a carrier supplied escorts under Massachusetts law. And as I noted in my letter, there are basically three types of transportation of the types of vehicles that make deliveries and pickups from my client's property. First of all, they're engaged by my client's customers, not by them. But there are basically three categories of deliveries that are made. There are loads that don't require escorts at all, and those are smaller vehicles. There are loads that under Mass law require both a carrier supplied escort and a police detail. That has not been my client's experience in terms of deliveries and shipments from their facility. So that leaves the second category, which is oversized loads, which require a carrier supplied escort. And my client is prepared to agree to continue to engage a police detail in those situations where a shipment, a delivery, or a shipment is being made, where the carrier is required under Mass law, requires an escort. This is an additional level of safety that my client's prepared to engage in. As far as I recall somebody asking, "Gee, how do we enforce this? How do we get KW Steel to do what they say they're going to do?" And it was a suggestion. I don't know if I made it or if somebody else made it, but we would request that the building department issue a certificate of occupancy with these conditions contained in them. That would provide jurisdiction to the building commissioner to bring an enforcement action if there were a specific violation that could be demonstrated. For example, if a truck came that required a carrier supplied escort that didn't have where they failed to provide a police escort, or if they were operating operating with excessive noise. I am, again, I'm not aware that that part of this cease and desist order is a violation of a zoning issue. I believe that there's any sort of assertion here that my client's business is and I don't really have the language here, but that it's in violation of a noise ordinance. As far as I know, the only noise issue was that single instance back in September.
Okay, and you've discussed that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Because you've been going for 11 minutes. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, Mr. Chairman. I did. My client, Mr. Webster, is on the line. If he had anything that he wanted to add at this point.
It's often best just to have your counsel talk.
Yeah.
Okay. At this point, what I'd like to do is have, I believe we have Counsel O'Connell. Is he available?
Yes. Let me just promote him 1 second.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I apologize, if there are any other conditions that the building department or the board would like my client to consider, that we're certainly amenable to that. And I apologize for not including that in my remarks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. O'Connell, you can come off mute and address the board.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you again for taking a ton of time. And I don't want to repeat myself. I'd like to just give a quick summary, and I would just like to submit that this is a really simple case. All we're doing, and I know town council spoke earlier about how the decision is going to be rendered, but it's a very simple case. All we're asking is that the board uphold Building Commissioner Yanovich's cease and desist order notice that was dated October 13, 2020, without any conditions. Again, without spending too much time on the procedural, how the decision is going to be structured, I would submit, again, there's overwhelming evidence that has been submitted in both prior hearings via videos, testimony, even some of the appellant's testimony as far as the operations that are occurring at the property. And you heard from the appellant's counsel who spoke about the use being allowed. And I would just ask that the board use the plain meaning of the bylaw and start with the definition of a limited manufacturing and really what the spirit and purpose of the zoning bylaw is, especially in a limited manufacturing zone, which is to protect the neighbors and the residents and the abutters. And this is really a situation that based on the events that have occurred and the operations that have occurred that have been well documented by my client, Mr. Lynch, as well as the other residents who have spoken at the hearing, that this is a heavy manufacturing use that's not allowed in a limited manufacturing zone. And again, I don't want to repeat myself. That definition references that that the manufacturing is supposed to be unobtrusive, and based on all the testimony that you've heard, it's been anything but. I would submit that as far as the issues that are for the board's consideration, the cease and desist order, obviously, whether the use is allowed as of right. And again, I would submit that, if there's issues with the definition of manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, the board, as a court would decide, would look at the common application and the usage, starting with the definition of an LM zone. And then if they wanted to delve in, like my brother did, into the use tables, I think it's pretty clear that subsection P is not what they're doing. It's not allowed this is not heavy machinery, such as agricultural. That would be if they were making lawnmowers, things to that effect. It doesn't fall in under subsection Q, which is planned for light metals or plastic fabrications. So their use is not allowed. Although it may not be prohibited, I would submit again that the board just use their common experience in interpreting the bylaw, looking at the LM zone, looking at the spirit and intent of the bylaw, and the occurrences and the activities that are going on at the site, which include, and if you look at the KW Steel Structures website and their capability statement, there's reference to manufacturing large steel beams, bridges. It's too large for the site. Not to mention the issues that have come up in both prior hearings, which include the delivery of the steel manufacturing beams. I mean, you've heard about 50 to 100 foot long beams that are being transported off the premises. So, I think a couple of your members, Member Coffey had mentioned at one of the hearings that the building and, and the use is just not a fit for this neighborhood. I think, Member Delaney had looked at the operations not during the site visit and had some concerns. Not to jump around and through you, Mr. Chairman, but there's more than just the use of right and the certificate of occupancy. I would submit that the certificate of occupancy is a major component. It was never obtained, and clearly this is a change of use, which requires a certificate of occupancy. You heard testimony previously about Denmark pumps. My brother, the appellant, I think had referenced in his correspondence that the business is different. He admitted the business is different, but that the use was somehow the same. But that's clearly not what's happened. If the board looks at the prior uses, Denmark pumps, which was a machine shop. Before then, there was Walpole Woodworkers, who was doing storage. The heavy manufacturing and fabrication of steel was not going on. So they were required to get they were required to get a certificate of occupancy. Why they didn't, why the town didn't require it, we don't know. But that is part and parcel of this cease and desist violation. And I would submit that the board's going to look at this as a whole. The other thing that the board, I would request that the board look at and make findings on is, in Member Fitzgerald had mentioned this during, it may have been I think it was during the first hearing, but they need to independently look at section 5A, 5A1B, not just with respect to the noise, but with respect to whether the activities that are going on, the use that's going on, as well as the off-site activities, including the transportation to and from of large steel beams, is presenting a danger, is injurious, dangerous, obnoxious, or offensive to people in the general vicinity by reason of the emission of odor, not just odor. There's a lot more than noise, but it's by emission of odor, fumes, vibration, noise, glare, or other nuisances observable at the lot lines, which clearly, there's stuff going on in the storage area abutting my client's property, or the immediate neighborhood. I would submit that the board needs to also make a separate determination that this activity is it complies with section 5A1B, and that is independent of any determination they make with respect to whether the cease and desist order should be upheld. And through you, Mr. Chairman, and I don't want to take up all the board's time. You've been terrific, giving us a ton of time. But I was a little confused with the burden. My understanding, again, is that the burden is on the appellant. So Commissioner Yanovich issued the cease and desist order. And the board is either going to uphold that cease and desist order, or, if they're going to flip Attorney Yanovich, then they're going to need a required more than the quorum, but affirmative amount of votes. So it seemed like it got a little bit muddled through you, Mr. Chairman, with town council. And also with respect to conditioning an occupancy permit if the board heads in that direction. It seems like it's highly unusual. You know, with respect to my brother's reference to mitigation with the hours being reduced, or the hours being pushed back to later, that the doors being closed, or the police details, those conditions are not going to address the general activities, operations, and potential dangers that are occurring in the neighborhood. You've heard some of the activities that have been going on. My brother tried to delegate the incident on January 4th by referencing that it was one of their not a subcontractor, but someone that was delivering or taking steel away. This is part of the operation. This is part of the operation. And not once, Mr. Chairman, have we heard from the appellant. We've heard from appellant's counsel, but we've never heard from Nancy Webster. Not once has Ms. Webster ever talked to my client. We don't even know who she is. We've heard from her husband, but we've never heard from her. So for those reasons, I think the evidence is just overwhelming that, and you have it in front of you, board members. The evidence is overwhelming to support Commissioner Yanovich's cease and desist order and upholding that. And you need, and I would respectfully request that you need to look at that certificate of occupancy, make findings on that, which is a condition of the cease and desist order, as well as Section 5AB1 addressing whether this operation, the storage and the transport of the vehicles is a danger to not only the abutters, but the immediate neighborhood and the town, frankly. So for those reasons, I think the evidence is overwhelming. It's clear. There's been a ton of evidence submitted, and again, I would just ask the board to go back to the purpose intent of the bylaw, which is to really make sure that when there's a business involved, limited manufacturing, that the neighbors are protected. I don't want the board to get hung up on my brother's legal arguments that somehow the use is allowed as of right because because of a definition. The board has enough experience where they can clearly interpret the definition of an LLM zone, the activities and the operations that have occurred, and put this together, as well as the fact that these activities and operations cannot be, they don't comport with subsections P and Q, as my brother, I think, tried to allege. So for those reasons, again, I'd ask you to just uphold the cease and desist order and make those other findings. Thank you again for the board's time.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Harry Webster is the general manager of the company, and he's spoken at length in this case. I just need to point that out, that he is not the speaking as the husband of the owner. He's the general manager of the company.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. O'Connell, thank you for your comments, and
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Okay, is there anything that board members want to discuss? Because I think at this point we've heard from both councils, we've had a number of submissions, and what we should do is talk about where we're at on this amongst the board, because we have not deliberated, and I think the way I'm looking at it, and town council, what I'm looking at is basically two issues here. One is the use allowed in the limited manufacturing zone, and two, does the business require a certificate of occupancy? Do you feel that's the two issues that we should be looking at?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, the second becomes moot if you found it was not as of right.
Okay, so that's a good point. So let's have a discussion right now, as far as, you know, where do the board members feel as far as, you know, allowed use, or where are we at as far as your opinion on, is this an allowed use in this district? And whoever wants to, what board member, Bob, do you want to go?
Sure, I'll kick things off. So I think to start, the way that I'm looking at this is to, you know, look at the bylaw itself and the use categories that have been mentioned, and if we can, on the basis of that, determine whether this use falls within one of those categories, or if it doesn't. That's sort of the first step of the process. As George said, you know, I don't think we get to a certificate of occupancy question if we find that the use isn't allowed in this district. So in going back through the original cease and desist back on September 16th, you know, that was the violation with regard to the excessive noise, and essentially a nuisance condition. And in response to that, there was a letter submitted by the appellant who spoke about various aspects of what was happening inside the building, and referred and said that 100% of the fabrication activities were taking place inside the building. And then in October 13th, there's the cease and desist order that raised the use not being allowed and the absence of a certificate of occupancy. And in that cease and desist order, the words heavy manufacturing were used. But as I look at the zoning bylaw, that's not the language of the use table. And that may have just been a colloquialism or sort of a way that it was describing what was going on in the building. But when I look at the use table items, item Q, it says a plant for light metal or plastic fabrication or finishing. So I think and then I should say in response to the October cease and desist, there was subsequent materials provided by the appellant and the appellant's counsel that described it as fabrication activities inside the building. So I looked at Q and I think, well, that's the bylaw as just plainly read says light metal fabrication and not and by that I think what it means is not heavy steel, heavy, I think the intent there is to say that that it's light. The word light to me is qualifying metal and plastic. So I think the intent is, if you're building small things like computers or things that involve light components, that's one thing. But I don't think, at least in my mind, there's not much of a dispute really that what's happening inside the building is fabrication of steel beams into larger things like highway girders and other components that I think on a plain interpretation of Q, I think, does not fall within that category. The other item or element of the use table was P, heavy machinery. I don't, my sense of it is that it's not, doesn't fall within that category really. They're not, I don't know it. You would think it would say something like plant for, manufacturing heavy machinery. I don't know what just having heavy machinery on the site is probably not. I think it means either the use of or manufacture of those types of things, especially when you consider metal foundry products and things that involve the operation of heavy machinery. So, in terms of whether the use is permitted, I'm based on that, and I think the facts around what's going on inside the building being fabrication, the fact that it's not light metal but structural steel to construct, things like highway girders and the like. I guess I would say that I'd love to hear the board's view on laying it out in that fashion, but that's sort of where I'm thinking at the moment, that that it doesn't fall within the use categories that are allowed. On the issue of whether that means a particular use isn't allowed anywhere in the town, I think, and we can hear from town council on this, but I don't believe there's any rule that says that a particular use must be allowed somewhere in the town. I know that there are rules about having at least one allowed use in a zoning district, so that you cannot make everything a discretionary approval. But in this case, there are multiple uses that are listed in the table that are allowed in this district. So I don't think we're going to run afoul of anything if we, on the basis of what this means for other zoning districts. I think it's just a question of whether in this district this use is permitted. So maybe I'd stop there and we can hear from other board members about just the straight interpretation of the language. I guess if I could say one other thing about that, I appreciate that the one section of the bylaw talks about what the intent of the purpose of the limited manufacturing district is, and I think that's informative to our interpretation. But I think where the sort of rubber hits the road on this is really whether we think it falls within a use that's allowed in the table. So I'll stop talking now, and you guys pick it up from there.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
John?
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
I guess I've given a lot of thought to this because I think the people will feel it could be a toss-up. It is or it isn't. I've looked at it. I've looked at the bylaws. And I guess I feel I'm with Bob. The word light means light to me. And I think if something were going on inside of that building that was light and didn't create a noise condition, that would be one thing. But this business, as it is now, I see it has two parts to it. It's not only what's going on inside that building, but the contingent upon what goes on inside building brings a lot of heavy traffic. And these big trucks. And we did see the videos of the trucks backing up, going the wrong way and having to take a wide swing. And so my issue is this. I'm looking at this as one whole thing. What goes on inside the building and what takes place outside the building have a business at all. And when I look at the applicant's lawyer has said that they would be willing to have, police details, et cetera. Now, it's the finite area. A detail might be required for so many feet. What if something's 2 feet less than that? To me, that residential neighborhood is a big deal. Now, a lot of towns surrounding, and I don't know whether we have this in Walpole or not, have areas, residential areas, where there are big signs, no heavy trucking, no commercial vehicles. And I think these people who live up there, they get along very well with people, and the Walpole woodworkers and so forth. But I don't think they were ever presented with this kind of a business that contingent upon that business, to me, presents a clear and present danger to anybody who's out there. I just think the heavy equipment that goes in and out of there, police detail or no police detail, those trucks that this business relies upon in order to be a business are far too big to be in that small residential area. The trucks are huge, and I don't know, that's how I feel about it. I'm inclined to agree with Bob in terms of light, and I've looked at this and I've gone over it and over it in my mind, and I keep thinking, well, you know, if it weren't for these trucks, maybe, but these trucks are necessary for that business to operate. And therefore, looking at it as a whole, I'm not in favor of this. I do think that I don't think it should be allowed.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Okay, other board members, Drew or Dave?
Yeah, Chairman Lee, as the other board members spoke, I've kicked the bylaws around repeatedly, trying to decipher what could be justifiable in this situation. And when I look at the phrase of the health and safety and general welfare of the town inhabitants and the unobtrusive manufacturing uses, I have a difficult time with what I've personally witnessed or what the abutters have witnessed or documented and presented to this board as complying with that. I trust that the applicant is doing everything in their best efforts to mitigate that. But I guess I also look at it in the sense that if their council is proposing mitigation tactics to better the area of what their use intends, I think they're also accepting that there's issues presented with what they're doing. And I don't feel comfortable with the safety of the abutters of the area or the child care directly across from the property, allowing a business of this nature to be conducted. And I don't think it fits the proper description of light manufacturing. I have a very difficult time fitting that into this application here.
Okay, thank you, Drew. Dave Anderson. Dave, you're on mute still.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. So I was part of the site visit. You know, I was part of the members that visited the site. I reviewed all the, documentation and videos, and it's really simple for me. I just can't imagine a scenario where light manufacturing includes 80-foot steel beams, which I would consider some of the largest pieces of manufacturing anything that I could even think of. It's really that simple for me. I just don't believe that it fits into the limited manufacturing use, the light manufacturing, I should say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. So,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make one point. Maybe we could get guidance from town council on this, but limited manufacturing is the name of the zoning district, and we're sort of informed by what generally the purpose of that district is. But I think we should be guided by the language in the zoning table itself as the definition of the use. And I think we can't. I don't think it would be appropriate to base our decision entirely on the fact that the name of the district is limited manufacturing. It should be based that can guide us and provide some context for interpreting the specific uses allowed in the table. But I just would suggest that we, determine whether it falls within one of the allowed uses within the table.
okay, George, do you want to address that?
Yes, Bob had cited the relevant language because that's right. You can't just determine that limited manufacturing in a vacuum. There's not a lot of information provided in the bylaw, but it does give examples of what, and Bob cited those exactly. What's allowed there would be examples of that. heavy machinery, metal foundry products, plant for light metal or plastic fabrication or finishing, but not including heavy punch presses or drop hammers. So those are examples. That's not exhaustive, you know. So if you're you know, find that what's going on there based on the information presented during the public hearing is analogous to those examples, then that would be grounds for saying this would qualify. If you don't find it analogous to those examples, that would be a rational basis for saying, no, this does not constitute limited manufacturing. This is not as of right.
Okay. And you know, one of the problems I think that we're running into is that there's nowhere in the zoning bylaw that says specifically, you know, welding steel beams of certain sizes, and that's why the zoning board has to sit and interpret this. So it seems like most of the board members, you know, viewing that this is not a use that it should be allowed in this zone. I actually I disagree with this, and there's a couple points that I look at. In the zoning bylaws, it doesn't specifically give us this exact type of business, so we have to look and say, okay, what is the business that this is closest to? And that's why I look over to P and I'm sorry, Q and whatever, I got it right here. Q is for light metal, plastic fabrication, finishing, but then it goes not to include heavy punch presses or drop hammers. Those would be things that would be very disruptive to a neighborhood and noisy. And then also I look at, you know, heavy machinery. Well, you know, it seems like this would be, you know, heavy machinery if we're going to go that route. And then when we look over, it is an allowed use it is allowed in limited manufacturing. So I'm feeling that this use is allowed in this zone. And then I also pull up the zoning map and I take a look other places in town where we have the limited manufacturing zone. And, you know, these areas have businesses that would be similar to this. You know, it's along Norfolk Street, not too far from where I live, and that's the type of businesses that are there that could do this type of work in a limited manufacturing zone. I think the issue that we're running into here is that there's residential areas around the limited manufacturing zone, but the question that I'm looking at is this allowed in a limited manufacturing zone? And I think that it is. So that's my take on it. And I've already heard from, you know, the other board members, and I very much respect your opinions and where you're coming from, but I just want to express where I'm coming from on this. Okay. Do any other board members have any comments? Okay. Mr. Yanovich, do you have anything to say?
Mr. Chairman, no, I mean, so there's a kind of an overarching issue here. Once, you know, we're waiting for the decision to be rendered as to whether or not the use is allowed. You know, the catch-all here, subsequent to a decision, if the use is allowed, what we haven't discussed yet in any of these hearings is Section 5C in the bylaw, which specifies uses that shall be enclosed or shall be entirely within an enclosed structure. So under 5C, it specifies uses that are not required to be outside, such as business uses that have wholesale or stock that you're selling. So this is a use that's not included in that section. So if the board finds that this is an allowed use, I will enforce the fact that the use in this district, non-residential district under 5C, shall be undertaken entirely within the building.
Okay, I was just pulling up 5C enclosure uses just to see exactly what you're talking about. And so, in your opinion, would that, you know, we're getting ahead of where we're at right now. So I do appreciate your comments, Mr. Yanovich. Okay, so board members, do you feel comfortable that we could close this and, you know, come up with a decision, or do you want to have more discussion? Okay, I'm not.
Just one, I guess, question for Mr. Yanovich, which does go to the certificate of occupancy question, which I know is sort of the next step in this if the board decides to get there. But I'm just curious with the practices of the building department when what it considers to be a change of use that requires the issuance of a new certificate of occupancy. So I could see a situation, for example, where there's an office building and an office tenant moves out and a new person buys the building, still an office use, still falls in that classification of use. So you wouldn't necessarily need a new certificate of occupancy for that. But in situations where the activities inside, you know, like in this case, there's been discussion about the prior pump and prior sort of activities there as contrasted to what's happening now. Are those types of changes the types of changes that typically would warrant a certificate of occupancy for the new, or does it fall? Do you look at it more as just a broad classification? They're building things, they're still building things, so that's the same use. Or do you look at specifically into the use table whether it's a different classification?
So for our purposes here, we're looking at the zoning bylaw, and is there in fact a change of use from Denmark Pump, from Walpole Woodworkers? Was there an intensification of the use? It's also almost like a powers test kind of review. Powers obviously refers to you know, non-conforming uses and intensification of uses in the bylaw or in zoning. But that's kind of the way we're looking at it. Was there an intensification of the use that raised this to another use? So that's in the zoning bylaw specifically. There is obviously another you know, occupancy issue that comes under the building code. Was there a change of capacity? Was there a you know, extension of the premise? That's a little bit different, but we're narrow here in this violation or this cease and desist to, was there an intensification of the use to the point where it raised it to another use within the bylaw, from light manufacturing to heavy manufacturing? So that's what we're looking at specific here. So if somebody comes in, as you said, and is a business to a business, a hair salon to a hair salon, you know, a manufacturing business that produced fences to another business that produced fences. Is there an occupancy requirement? No, not necessarily. Some banks require that occupants obtain a certificate of occupancy for a new owner, but we wouldn't necessarily, because it wouldn't rise to, one, a change of use, or two, a change in capacity under the building code. So again, the initial question of, is this a change of use, is this an allowed use, would beget the requirement for a certificate of occupancy here.
Thank you.
And one other thing that I would add, part of my reason for thinking that this is an allowed use, is when we toured the facility, we saw the overhead cranes that have been there since the company was Hill Machine Company. And one of the questions, and we were very specific, or at least I was very specific, and I think the other board members were very specific on asking about the capacity of those lifts, and is there anything in here being lifted that cannot be lifted by those existing overhead cranes? And the answer was no. They weren't even coming close to capacity of those cranes that were in there. So again, so I'm looking at a building that's been there for a long time with different uses over the years, and the use that they are conducting, although it's different, it is still within the shall we say weight limits and classifications of that type of manufacturing. So that's also part of my reasoning. Okay. Anybody else have, so I think that what we can do is we can, in town council, do we close the hearing and then vote on the issue, or do we, what's your suggestion? How do we proceed? This is unusual for the zoning board, as we all know.
Yeah, I would recommend taking a vote to close the public hearing first, and then you deliberate, you can issue a decision. You know, the vote, the motion after you close it can be as simple as, I move to deny the appeal of the cease and desist order, and see how that vote comes out, and then take it from there. But I'm not a board member, but that's just one way that you could do it. But you know, if you're ready to close the public hearing, I would do that first, and then deliberate on a decision and possibly take a vote.
Okay. I do see some panelists have asked, are we going to take comments from the public? I will say that we will take comments from the public, but as we looked at as both counsel for the appellant and also counsel for the neighbors, they had limited amounts of time. I want to ask people to be very brief with their comments, if they have any comments, and we will go from there, because I do want to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak on this. But please keep your comments to less than 2 minutes, and unless you have something totally new that's going to influence the board members. Okay, Ashley, okay. I guess Amy. Yep.
I'm good. Okay, so we have one hand raised, and it's Jack Fisher. So whenever you're ready, Jack.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for the time. I know you guys have put an awful lot of time into this. I'm just going to make a couple of comments. I'll keep it very brief, John. I think in hearing the comments that the board members made, I think you hit upon the key element here. That if you look at paragraph Q of the use table, it says very specifically light metal or plastic manufacturing, and in no way can this be considered to be light metal or plastic manufacturing. The other comment I'd like to make is there seem to be at different times there seem to be some sentiment towards trying to work this rather than through as a zoning issue, as an occupancy issue, and I honestly tell you that I think that would be a very bad mistake. Right now, if you're dealing with this as a zoning issue, it's an enforcement issue. If you go to an occupancy issue, then it becomes a negotiation on terms. And so I would respectfully request that you deny the administrative appeal and let the cease and desist order stay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fisher. Is there anybody else that would like to comment on this?
I don't see any hands raised at the moment.
Okay. So board members, I think
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before you close the public hearing, this is to a point that you made, but I'd like to share my screen. I have an email from Mr. Yanovich dated January 25, and he suggested as an alternative location, he suggested a facility located, we were talking about possible facilities, and he suggested one possible location within Walpole in an industrial area, 16 to 18 Renmar. And Mr. Chairman, to your point, that's a location that is also located in the limited manufacturing district. So I just, if we are parsing that issue as to whether a use is permitted, the building inspector has actually made a suggestion that a potential location to which my client could move for this facility is yet another location in a limited manufacturing district. district. So I wanted that to put that in the record before you close the hearing.
Okay, thank you for that. So,
excuse me, Chairman Lee?
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't go through the site walkthrough, and I'm familiar enough with the cranes that you saw that could lift the capacity of the steel beams. And I don't know enough of what Denmark Pump did, but for what they manufactured at Denmark Pump, though the weight might have exceeded the crane's capacity, did it stick off the back of trucks 50 feet leaving the property or premises? Not that that necessarily dictates what the zoning use is, but I guess I'm just curious, even though the weight of the crane could necessarily pick that up, did it fit in the back of a pickup truck? Or I guess I just like clarification regarding that.
So, you know, I actually thought about that, and when it used to be Ingersoll Rand and then Denmark Pump, I used to spend time in that neighborhood. And one of the things that I remember seeing trucks going in there, but they weren't the long trailers that they're now dealing with. They were you know, smaller trucks, but with large industrial pumps on them. So yes, they still had, in my opinion, like heavy pumps that were being brought in there, but they were not, as I recall, huge, you know, long trucks like we see now. Does that answer your question, Drew?
Yeah, it does, and I appreciate that, because I was questioning that for a while, and I appreciate the clarification. And I know we have to rule on the present, and I guess my only other thought would be if anyone happened to know the history as far as the density of residential units when this was zoned for limited manufacturing, and if it was relevant to what it is today. I understand areas are developed over time, and zoning doesn't necessarily run parallel with that. And I guess I'm wondering if we're potentially rolling on something that is from, you know, decades ago, I guess is the only thing I would question. But I don't know if anyone can necessarily answer that or not, I guess. So I just was curious.
So what we're rolling on is the present situation, and you know, the facts are that you know, this is common in zoning. Things change, and but what we're clearly ruling is on is what is the present situation. So, okay. So if there's no other comments from board members, do you feel comfortable closing the hearing, and we can have a little more we can have as much deliberation as we want, and then we could vote on the issue of the use in the LM zone. So let's see, Bob, anything before? Are you comfortable closing?
I think the only you know, whether board members want to, before we close the hearing, get any more information on as to the certificate of occupancy questions and things like that, because if we deliberate and decide that it is an allowed use but wanted to go down the certificate of occupancy route, then you know, we wouldn't be able to ask further questions. So that's my only question, my thought.
And Mr. Chairman, to that issue, I would point out, I believe this is one of my letters, but it's also a matter of public record at the building commissioner's office. There has not been a certificate of occupancy issued for that building in 20 years. So there is no certificate of occupancy for Denmark Pump, nor is there one for Walpole Woodworking. So there's really, it's difficult to see that there is an existing certificate of occupancy for which a change of use could be requested.
Okay. Mr. O'Connell, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Only if the board, pursuant to Mr. Fitzgerald's inquiry concerning the prior uses, I'd be happy to, I just have a sheet indicating what the prior uses were with respect to Denmark Pump, 2015 to 18, Ingersoll Dresser Pump from 92 to 2002, Walpole Woodworkers, but only if the board, I know the board has labored on the issue, so, but I would, as I had mentioned earlier, I'd submit that there's been a substantial change in use, intensification, as Building Commissioner Yanovich had mentioned, if you're using that test, but, and again, my brother had mentioned that the business had changed, so, I would submit that it, again, definitely needed a certificate of occupancy.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so at this point, board members, could I have a motion to close the hearing? Please take yourself off mute.
So moved. Sorry.
Moved by Jane.
Second.
Second by Drew. Okay, any further discussion on closing the hearing? Okay. No further discussion. Roll call vote. Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
And Dave Anderson.
Aye.
Okay, so the hearing is closed at this point. So now comes the question of how do we want to word this? And what, again, I'm very glad George is here from Town Council. So would we take a vote to affirm the decision of the building inspector if we wanted to phrase it like that? George, how do you recommend that we phrase it?
Yeah, you could. I think it's cleaner to vote on the appeal, whether or not to uphold or deny the appeal.
Okay.
So, you could take a vote on that. Like, for instance, a motion to deny the appeal of the cease and desist order. If that carries by the requisite quantum of vote, then the cease and desist order stands.
And
I'm writing this. Okay.
will it be, does the board issue a written decision on that?
Yeah, I would recommend that.
Yeah.
Okay. Could I have a motion to deny the appeal of the applicant? Is that correct, George?
Well, it would be a motion to, if you're inclined to vote that way or entertain a motion, it would be a motion to deny the appeal of the cease and desist order. Did I get garbled?
No, I got it. Okay, I want to say that. Yeah, whoever's on, if we just go to mute, thank you. Could I have a motion to deny the appeal of the cease and desist order?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? George, are you comfortable with the way that's worded?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, just so we're all clear that if you vote in favor of denying the appeal, the cease and desist order stays in effect. Okay. So.
Repeat that again, would you please?
If you vote to deny the appeal, then the cease and desist order will stay in effect.
So if you want it to stay in effect, you vote nay?
No. George, go ahead.
It's a double negative.
You're right. So
no, the motion was to deny, if the motion is to deny the appeal, and you wanted to deny the appeal, which is seeking to overturn the cease and desist, then you would vote affirmative for that motion.
Thank
And just to clarify for the board too, you have 5 eligible voting members for this. That's who's participated in the public hearing to date. And so to have a motion carry, you need 4/5.
Okay. Okay. So, it's not majority, George?
No.
Okay, so 4/5. Okay. So, if you want, let's just be real. George, say it again. What is a nay vote and a yes vote?
A positive vote on this motion will deny the appeal filed by Attorney Corner, and it will result in upholding the cease and desist order. In other words, if you deny the appeal of the cease and desist order, the cease and desist order will stand.
So you have to vote aye if you want it to stand.
On that motion, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with what we're trying to do here, at least procedurally?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this would be any further discussion? Okay, at this point we will vote. I'll start out with Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Okay. Drew Delaney.
No.
Okay. Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Dave Anderson.
Aye.
And I vote no. Okay. Okay, so it does not, the motion to deny the appeal does not carry. Is that correct, George? Because you needed.
Yes. Right. Correct. Now you should take a vote on whether to affirm the appeal.
Okay. Okay.
That's going to result in the overturning of the cease and desist.
Okay.
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Since we may reach that decision now, I think the next question is the other element of the cease and desist order was the certificate of occupancy, and whether or not we need to have a vote as to requiring the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, and whether there should be conditions to that certificate. I'm just raising that if that's procedurally what we should do next, or if we just vote to uphold the appeal, then that issue will effectively go away as well.
Okay. George, what's your guidance on that? And Bob, I understand what you're saying. I want to get the correct wording on this.
Well, to be clear, you need 4 out of 5 to overturn the order.
Do I need to speak?
So you need 4 out of 5 to overturn the order. So you could take another vote on whether to affirm the appeal. If that motion fails, the cease and desist will also stand.
Now you've lost me.
The only reason I recommended the motion that I did was it sounded that the consensus of the board was to uphold the cease and desist order. So you may want to, for clarity, you may want to take a vote on whether to affirm the appeal of the cease and desist order.
Okay. Okay. So really, okay.
I think maybe it may be that the vote that we just took, was sufficient to, set the certificate of occupancy issue aside. We voted, I think, on the entire appeal, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Well, what we did, yes, we voted on the entire appeal. That's what, and so now, at this point, Yes, we voted on the appeal of the cease and desist order. You are correct. So what we voted on was we overturned the decision of we overturned the cease and desist. So
no, you didn't.
Okay.
All you did was
No, we didn't.
your vote failed to deny the appeal. If you want to go ahead and affirm, if you want to overturn the order, you're going to have to take an affirmative vote to affirm the appeal.
Okay.
And you need a 4/5 vote to overturn the cease and desist order.
Okay. So
if that fails, it's also going to end up being, in effect, affirming the cease and desist order because you don't have an affirmative vote overturning it.
George, what would you recommend for a motion to accomplish what you just stated?
A motion to affirm the appeal.
So if you wanted the appeal to stand, you would vote yes. Is that correct?
Correct. And that would, in effect, overturn the cease and desist order. Let's, John, there's a lot at stake in this, you know, and I recommend just to open the hearing just to hear from counsel, both Attorney O'Connell and Attorney Corner, because I don't want any procedural argument. I want this to be substantive, whether or not the board's going to vote to uphold this appeal or not, to overturn the building commissioner's decision. Do they have any objections to the way these motions are going? Do they have a different suggestion? Well, let's be clear now because we don't want to
Mr. Chairman,
needless issues be litigated.
Yep.
George, the hearing, we closed the hearing. Can we reopen it?
Yeah, for that purpose. Just to hear on that limited issue, because this is going to end up in court one way or another. And let's not waste time in court arguing about procedurally if somebody has an objection.
Okay. So, do we have to vote to reopen this?
Yeah. Why don't you take a vote to reopen just for that limited purpose of seeing if there's an objection from counsel about the way that you're conducting these votes.
Okay. So, could I have a motion to reopen this case?
So moved.
Moved by Jane.
Second.
Second by Bob. Okay. Any further discussion? This is just to reopen, and it's only to get input from both councils and our town council to make sure that this is done correctly. Okay. Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Bill Laney.
Aye.
Dave Anderson.
Aye.
And John Lee, aye. Okay. So, Mr. O'Connell, I see you have your hand raised. Is there something that you want to add to this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just for the record, I object with just procedurally the way the vote's been framed. I think it's a very simple vote, which is whether the board is going to uphold the cease and desist notice. And my understanding is that the appellant or the applicant has the burden and would require a 4/5 vote to overturn the cease and desist order. So I that's the way I read it, town council, through you, Mr. Chairman, town council. But it's a very simple vote whether, in fact, there was enough evidence to sustain building commissioner Yanovich's cease and desist order. And my understanding is for his decision to be flipped is going to require a supermajority vote overturning his decision. I think it's as simple as that. So the way it was framed, I would object was somewhat confusing. But again, what's at issue again is is whether this board will uphold the cease and desist order. And in order for that burden to be overcome, the appellant has the burden to obtain 4/5 or a supermajority of the board. That's the way I interpret it, and through you, Mr. Chairman, through town council. Thank you.
And I agree with that, John. That's what I said. You need, if you're going to overturn the order, you need a 4/5 vote. And as I said, the consensus of the board appeared to be, before you took that vote, that they were going to want to affirm the cease and desist. So that's why it made sense to vote it that way. I do think you should vote on the appeal. You know, one way or another. Either we're going to affirm the appeal, which results in overturning the cease and desist order, or we're going to deny the appeal, which results in de facto upholding the cease and desist order. But whatever way you look at it, you need a 4/5 vote to overturn that order. So so say you receive a motion, I move to affirm the appeal of the cease and desist order. If that motion only gets a 3-2 vote, that fails the requisite quantum of vote, and it results in the cease and desist order standing in full force and effect.
Okay.
So that's right. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's why I'm saying let's get the input from the council now, because we don't need to hear a procedural objection later.
Right. Okay. I think when I worded that, and Jane pointed out it was like a double negative, and I'm sorry. Council Corner, do you have anything to add or say, just to be fair here?
What are you asking me, Mr. Chairman? What input do you seek from me?
I want to make sure that this is not being, however this goes, I want to make sure that it's done fairly. And council has suggested a way that we can do it fairly. Mr. O'Connell did the same, and I just want to be fair if you have anything to add.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that you would like to do it fairly, and but I, respectfully, I reserve any objections that I would have to the procedures, because this will end up in court.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll see. Okay.
So then, John, what I would do is I would recommend a vote on whether to affirm the appeal. And that would be as simple as I move to affirm the appeal of the cease and desist order. I move to affirm the appeal overturning the cease and desist order. And then the repercussion of that, if it receives a 4/5 vote, it will result in overturning it. If it fails the requisite quantum of vote, even if it receives a majority, 3-2, to affirm the appeal, the cease and desist order will still stand. Maybe that's the easiest way for you to do it. And having heard from council, if they don't want to give any further input, I would recommend you first then close the hearing.
Okay. This is a vote to close the hearing. Could I have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Moved by Bob. Second, please.
So moved.
Moved by Jane. Okay. Any further discussion? This is just to reclose the hearing. Okay. Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
Dave Anderson.
Aye.
And I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay. So George, what I wrote down from what you said was a motion to affirm the appeal of the cease and desist.
Yes. Or I move to affirm the appeal of the cease and I move to affirm the appeal and overturn the cease and desist order.
Okay. So, affirm the appeal and overturn the cease and desist order.
Correct.
Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Bob. Jane seconded. Second by Jane.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, George, if you want to.
Now, can we clarify?
Yes. Yes. George, please explain what a yes vote would be and what a no vote would be.
A yes vote on that motion will overturn the cease and desist order if it receives 4/5 of a vote.
So if we don't want it overturned, we vote no.
Correct.
I'm having a hard time wondering why this is so difficult, but okay. So a yes vote will overturn it.
A yes vote on that motion will overturn the cease and desist order, correct? Because it's a motion to affirm the appeal.
So I'd want to vote yes if I wanted the appeal to stand.
If you want the appeal to stand, which is seeking to overturn the cease and desist order, yes, you would vote yes on that motion.
Okay, you know what?
The issue before you is an appeal of the cease and desist order.
Right.
So you have an affirmative motion before you saying, I affirm the appeal of the cease and desist order. So a yes vote on that motion means that you desire to overturn the cease and desist order. Does everybody get it?
Yes.
Okay. Jane, do you understand it?
I guess so.
No. We need to make sure we all understand so that we vote on what we know we're voting on and we do it accurately and fairly. So
if I vote yes, it means I want the appeal. I mean, I want.
If you vote yes, yes, it means that you agree with Attorney Corner that the cease and desist order should be overturned. You're agreeing with the appeal. If you're voting to affirm the appeal. If you don't want to affirm the appeal, if you want the cease and desist order to stand, you would vote no on that motion.
Got it.
The only reason I'm telling the board about the quantum of vote is just so that you're not surprised later. Oh, gee, you never told me what that meant, that we needed a 4/5 vote to overturn the order. I just wanted you to know that, but the fact is, you have to vote substantively how you feel on the appeal. Do you feel that the cease and desist order should be overturned? If you do, you would vote yes on this motion.
I'm all.
Okay. Okay. So roll call vote. Bob Fitzgerald.
No.
Drew Delaney.
No.
Dave Anderson.
No.
Jane Coffey.
No.
And I'm John Lee. Yes. Okay. So that's a 4-1 vote. So town council, that means that it does that the appeal I'm sorry, the cease and desist is sustained. Is that correct, Town Council?
Correct. Correct. The appeal fails only because it failed to reach the requisite quantum of vote.
Okay. Okay.
So your cease and desist order stands on that vote.
Okay. So at this point, I think that the issue of certificate of occupancy, that's not even something that we should address. So Bob, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the vote was whether to sustain the appeal or not, and in total. So it seems to me that we've voted to uphold the cease and desist order as it was written.
Okay. George, do you have anything else for the zoning board?
No, I agree on that. I mean, I don't see how you could issue a certificate of occupancy on a use that's not permitted. That, you know, and that's what the cease and desist order says, that it does not qualify as limited manufacturing.
Okay, very good. So that wraps it up for that part of the meeting, and we just have some minutes to vote on.
And John, I would recommend, you know, having staff do a decision. I would do a written decision so that you have some, you know, an operative document that can be appealed as opposed to just the vote tonight.
Oh, yeah.
I would have a written decision just incorporating what the vote was tonight following the public hearing.
We'll have a written decision, and I'm going to ask that you work with me on that, and we'll get that in writing so it's clear.
That's great.
Okay.
All set?
Okay, thank you. Okay,
thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. So the other thing that we had on the agenda, just minutes to review from February 10th. Does anybody, I asked that one correction, Amy, be made, the bit about illegal dumping. I didn't want any part of that on the minutes.
Yeah, so I did change it in the minutes. I didn't send it over again just because it is one word. Do you want the word illegal removed or the whole phrase of dumping in general?
No, illegal dumping, because
Okay.
we don't know if there was illegal dumping, but saying illegal dumping, as an environmental guy, that scares me. So.
Okay, so I did remove that word.
Okay. Bob, anything on those minutes?
No, other than that change, I think they look great.
Anybody else on the minutes? Okay. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes of February 10th?
So moved.
Okay. Second by Jane. Okay. Any further discussion on the minutes? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Roll call vote. Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Dave Anderson.
Aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay. Anything else? Okay. We still have participants out there. So thank you, everybody. And I will see you for our next
Monday.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Bob. With Jane. Okay, this can be a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.